Meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee to order. This meeting is taking place using the GoToMeeting electronic platform. All participation is taking place remotely, not in person. The meeting is being televised and recorded by Chelmsford Telemedia for interested community members to access and watch. Community members were encouraged to submit comments and questions through school committee members or superintendent of schools, Dr. J. Lang, via email. These comments will be read under the public participation portion of the agenda. If anyone watching this meeting live has questions or comments to share, you're encouraged to email one of us during the meeting. We will read those during our second public input session at the end of the meeting. So welcome to this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee. For the record, we just go around and verify all the members that are here. So Donna Newcomb.
Here.
Maria Santos.
Here.
John Moses.
Here.
Jeff Doherty.
Here.
Superintendent Lang.
Here.
The Superintendent Hirsch.
Here.
Joanna Johnson Collins.
Here.
We also have our student representatives and we have our recording secretary. Okay, so the first order of business is to approve the minutes for our meeting on May 19th.
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of the regular school committee meeting on May 19th, 2020. It's been a minute.
Second.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions or any corrections on the minutes from the 19th? All right. Seeing none, I will take a vote. Donna Newcomb.
Aye.
And Maria Santos.
Aye.
John Moses.
Aye.
Aye.
And Dennis King. Aye. Okay. So 5-0 to approve the minutes. Okay, next up, we have our student representatives. So Sudeep, your mic's on if you want to go first.
Oh yeah, okay. So today I went to the senior pickup for the cap and gown and it went really well. Everyone seemed really happy to see each other and teachers. It was very social distance friendly, so it was really nice and it went really well. So that was good to see. I helped out with that. And then with school in general, things are starting to wrap up. We're getting like weekly work as before. It seems like some teachers are starting to cool down with the work because I mean we're coming to an end. So yeah, it's been going well though.
Yeah, also in the next week or so, Dean Council will be sending out a survey to all of the students regarding the remote learning to get the students' opinion in case it goes on into next year. And that's about all we have.
Okay, great. Anybody have any questions for the student reps? Okay. All right. Any good news that anybody would like to share?
We just still have, just to echo on what the students are saying as well, is that they've had their parade today. They were going through the parking lots. There's other different events that are going on that have been highlighted in the weekly superintendent's newsletter, such as fourth grade Harrington already had their fourth grade send off for their fourth graders. They had them go through the parking lot. And again, everything is very student friendly and also social distancing friendly, and just that right now everybody's getting together to come up with their events for their retirees and the rest of their students. So there's going to be a lot of celebrations that are going to be happening in the next week and a half, and just please take some time to take a look at those in the newsletter for those of you that haven't had a chance, or the audience members haven't had a chance to go through and look.
Okay, great. All right. Anybody else have any good news you'd like to share?
Can I point out two things? One, this incredible painted sign that went up in the rear lot of the high school. It's on the grass that was done, congratulating the seniors. It's beautiful. If you have a chance and you want to ride by and see it, it's really nice. And I know the PTO put a wonderful banner, and I want to thank them because they also gave out gifts today to the seniors when they drove by. And secondly, to echo what the students said, I saw the teachers who came, the guidance counselors and everybody, and the parking lot was full. So it was really, really wonderful to see that, that the seniors were being given such a nice wave to goodbye. And it was nice to see that. So just thank you.
All right. All right, we're on to our first public input part of our meeting. If any members have received any emails with questions or comments that you would like to share at this time, so anybody have any emails they would like to share?
Dennis, we
Yeah.
received emails and I have them, but I think, they go to specific parts of the agenda. So rather than read them out and so on, maybe share them at that point and the
Okay.
content, and I'll say who sent them.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah, anybody else have any emails that they received they'd like to read? Okay, Donna Newcomb asked if she could offer something in public comment as both school committee member and as a citizen of Chelmsford. So Donna, the floor is yours.
Sure. As I thought about my comments tonight, I had a really hard time finding the right words to be able to express my concern, frustration, and anger for the recent events. And certainly with the pandemic, it has only complicated things even more. I think that the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd in the normal course of events would have been discussed and processed with our students during the school day. But we don't have the opportunity for that right now. And I think that as a school committee and as a community, we need to be able to find ways to offer students and community members a way to be able to express their thoughts and feelings. Because as I said, right now we don't have the set of circumstances that would allow for that type of very serious and very difficult conversation. So I wanted to suggest that maybe as a school committee, that we work with the superintendent and the administration and Jen Melanson to put together some type of forum that would allow students to come and express how it is they're feeling and what it is that they're thinking about the recent events. So, and I guess, I think that John would like to say something.
John Moses, 49 Parkerville, Chelmsford. So, yeah, I actually wanted to make some comments to express support for Donna's idea. It's been a really very difficult time to be a parent. Of young kids, and there's a lot of parents like me. I've had to explain rioting and murder and the world to my kids this week. And a lot of parents have had to have these same uncomfortable conversations. And I've had to teach my daughter and I try to explain there's a right way to protest and there's a right way to react to protest. And I support Donna's idea and whatever we're doing for civics instruction, inequality and diversity. We can do better. And I implore the administration to do better. Just everybody in this country needs to do better, and especially the things we can control, which is the school district. Thank you.
Thank you, John. All right. So, anybody else have any? Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Donna, for bringing that up. Marie, did you have something or?
Well, I am very sorry to see John. I hope he's okay. It's been a very, very tough week. I've been dealing with this for years in the field of immigration. So what's happened this week is a culmination of what's been going on out there. a friend of mine sent me a little screen that showed they painted a sign, "Do not burn this building," because immigration lawyers work here. And I really appreciated that because it's been very tough to work in the environment that we're dealing with. But beyond that, even my high schoolers this week questioned whether we're all going to die, whether, there's going to be some way that we're going to come out of this with loving people and caring for people just because they're people. So yes, it is very important for all of us to recognize the role that we each play in this world, and our diversity is what makes us strong and what makes us who we are. I am very sorry to see this. I am hoping that in the next few years, we get to address this and address it quickly. Because separating and dividing people is not the way to go. I have been extremely proud of our group. I really think us as a school committee, we have tried very hard through this whole
I think Maria might have frozen.
So just to reiterate, I'm sorry, go ahead.
and still keep moving forward. Oh,
You're back.
I'm back, okay. I look awful on the screen. So, but can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what's happening with the screen. This never happens. The world is just in a very tough position. And I really want to thank everybody at Chelmsford Public Schools who has tried to bring the counseling component online, who has tried to reach out to students, to families, people who had needs. But it's gone beyond that. It's not just the physical needs. It's gone into so much what we need mentally to keep this all together. The images we're seeing out there are just beyond. And we're not able to then come to a school or come to a place where we can all talk it out together. So anything we can do to help out, I think, is immensely important. And we set diversity as one of our goals, and we should definitely keep working on that, at making sure that in our school system, it's recognized and understood and dealt with in every aspect of education. In the delivery of the education, in the learning component of the education, in every facet of it. That's my feeling. And I think for young children, this is especially extremely difficult. The sense of hope is not there 100% right now. So thank you. Thank you for voicing that, Donna. Thank you, John, for being showing us that you really care and you're really concerned about this and that you're concerned for everyone. Thank you.
Donnie had one last thing to add, or are you good?
No, just as to reiterate what I said at the beginning, is I think that we have as an obligation as a school committee to model, the type of behavior that we expect to see in our students. And I think anything that we can do in order to be able to foster, opportunities for discussion, for openness and honesty. It is a responsibility of ours, and I think that we need to act. We need to act on this. That's it.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank Donna for bringing us up. She called me right before the meeting, and she, felt strongly that this is something that we should be, addressing. And although it was a little unusual for us to bring it up at the particular time of the meeting, I think, bringing it up and making people aware of that it is an issue that we're concerned with and going to be paying attention to. I think that is important. So I thank you, Donna, for bringing it up, and John and Maria for your input on that.
And I'd just like to say I agree
Yep.
completely. I agree. It's not just young kids, John. I have a 27 and a 25-year-old, and it's been tough conversations with them. It's a difficult time, but having been in the schools when we've had situations going all the way back to 9/11, we were able to be in the buildings and we were able to be there for the students and for each other. And I think Dawn is absolutely right that we have to make ourselves and our experts available because we've got to come to an understanding, but we just have to.
All right. Anyone else? All right, so before we get into new business, looking at the agenda, it's a very meaty agenda. There's a lot of important issues we're going to talk. So if I could just make a request that if you do have questions or comments to make, that you certainly question or comment. But if you after you've asked your question or comment, if you could then allow somebody else to ask a question, and then if other question you have to just we'll come back to those. I just want to make sure everybody has a chance to participate. So, if you have a question or comment, you by all means should ask, get your feedback. And then if we could allow other people to ask questions and comments, and then we'll come back around again. And just so we make sure everybody has a chance to participate. For my part, I'll try to break the items up a little bit. I know we have a lot coming up in the next hours here. So I'll try to break them up so that, we can discuss them individually and so things don't get lost in the wash. So if everybody's okay with that. Great. All right, so moving on to new business then. The first item is updates on the closures of the Chelmsford Public Schools.
Thank you, everyone. This is kind of a rolling report we've had on for the last number of previous school committee meetings. And I think the next time we meet, the school year is actually going to be officially done when we meet on the 16th. So this is probably the last one you'll see recapping what's presently happened. And then the conversation is going to start to shift to the reopening for the fall. But one of the things that struck me this past week as we were putting together the weekly newsletter that Linda helps assemble is I always forward you a copy of that. So you get some of the highlights of what's happening in the district. But unless you actually have students in the individual elementary or middle schools, the high school, you don't necessarily get their newsletters. So I had just asked the schools for the links because sometimes I feel like when we're talking at the school committee meeting, individual schools might be doing different things to celebrate either teachers or move-ups or grades. And the schools really do a nice job of putting their news and information out to the schools on a weekly basis. So I just kind of cut and pasted them all into one document for you. The other purpose, instead of just sending you the links to the documents, the other purpose in doing this as well is now it's part of our packet, which is online. So if a parent actually wanted to go who didn't have a child, say, at the Byham school, but they wanted to go and see what was happening with Principal Fredette's end of the year message with that, they can follow the link to that newsletter. So the first part of this is actually just for you kind of sharing those links to last week's information, because I think there's a lot of good information that gets communicated to parents directly at the school level. So I just wanted to share that with you. Second update, I had emailed you as well, but I wanted to kind of put into the record for the public if they were watching the meeting this evening. The high school administration and the student council at the high school and the class advisors have really worked hard over the last number of weeks, recognizing that this is truly an unprecedented time for the seniors. I don't think any of us, when we started the school year, ever thought we'd be ending the way we are. Seniors, really didn't have the traditional senior week. Everyone is trying to go above and beyond and do a little something special to celebrate. And really up until about a week and a half ago, the information we were receiving from the state was pretty much dictating some type of a virtual graduation. It really did not look like we were going to be able to have any kind of in-person graduation for the high school. Things did start to shift at the state level a little bit, and the high school ended up not kind of committing at that point to what the senior graduation was going to look like. Excuse me, and bought themselves a little bit more time for the governor to potentially allow for an in-person graduation. So while it's not ideal for everyone, I think the sentiment of the students and certainly the staff and the administration of the high school, they wanted to be able to have some type of in-person send-off for the kids. And so we were then kind of playing with the weeks. We knew that we were going to have to do virtual if it was up through the middle of July, that after the middle of July through early August, there's potential with the phase 3 reopening of the state that we'd be able to gather in larger groups. So we basically worked backwards from probably the last possible date that we could have the graduation, which is that second weekend in August, the weekend of August 8th. And the high school has committed one way or the other to basically having graduation that day. We are hoping to have an outdoor graduation on the field. So there will be a lot of planning that goes behind that. We're not going to know until a little bit later in the summer with regard to how big the event can be, but they at least wanted to get the word out to parents to kind of hold that date. Where it is an outdoor event, we do have a rain date of that Sunday, the 9th, but definitely one way or the other, there is going to be some graduation ceremony that weekend. In the event, because this has come up, in the event that some kids might have already left for school, that if they had a work commitment or a sports commitment or something like that, if there were any kind of complicating health issues or people didn't feel comfortable coming to an in-person gathering, the high school will be reaching out to schedule a time to either go to a home and drop off graduation materials and have a little presentation of the diploma, or they'll arrange a time for students and the families to come to the high school in a controlled environment also and be able to receive their diploma and any of their senior gifts. So that will be taken care of. But our hope is really to be able to honor the seniors in some way that weekend of August 8th. At this point in time, the way the high school has actually phased this, and again, I just wanted the public to kind of see some of the thinking behind this. They have basically phased this in different tiers. So obviously, if we were able to do this, they would love to be able to have all of the high school seniors on the football field, properly social distance, and to have a member or two of their family be able to be in attendance. There is really no way that we're ever going to get beyond a member or two of the immediate family, if we even get to that, based on the number of students and the need to keep the distancing. But that would be ideal, and I think that's what they're obviously going to plan for. But as we get deeper into July and we figure out if the state is going to start to relax some of the requirements for gatherings, if we weren't able to have all of the students and their families, the next best thing would be to have all of the students. So at least all of the students could graduate together, be present. Chelmsford Telemedia would live stream the event. We would have a recording, and families would be asked to watch the event on TV. Another tier down from that, in the event that we can't get all of the high school senior class together, would be to break it up by houses. So if we had to have 3 smaller ceremonies, we would have the various houses come at different times and have be able to graduate at least with the students in their house. And if we had to break it up further than that, again, based on where we are, we would do so. We may have to do alphabetically within house, or we will figure out a way that August 8th and 9th to be able to have graduation, but we at least want people to be able to lock in on those dates. Now, in the event that there is a turn for the worse, if something were to happen health-wise, if we weren't able to really open up and the government or the state would not allow us to have an in-person event, we then have to switch to a virtual event. We really don't have any other means of graduating the students beyond that. So I want to put it out there that the high school and everyone really is working as hard as they possibly can to have some type of an in-person honoring of the senior class. The absolute worst case scenario would be to have to move to a virtual event. But if we have to, it would also be conducted on that weekend. This isn't going to drag out any longer than that. At August 8th and 9th will be the weekend of high school graduation. So I know the high school has shared that information with the senior class students and parents. I had forwarded you the email, but I also, just for the viewing audience and the public, wanted them to know that a lot of thought and planning has gone into this. And at this point in time, that is how the high school is going to proceed with graduating the senior class.
Anybody have any questions or comments on graduation? Maria, you had a question? I see your hand.
Dennis, I think your comment at the beginning, I feel personally, I'm sorry if I make too many comments, but just gonna let you know, I'm just gonna let you know that I know that this week, that the senior class, through its officers and its advisors, is doing everything possible to bring a little bit of senior week online. So I know that there are special things happening for them, and that made me feel really wonderful. And so I wanted to let you all know that too, that is happening. and they're working in conjunction with other groups at the high school to get this done and really bringing it all together. Okay, so that it was wonderful to see.
All right, just Jay, in terms of virtual, they say you're gonna have to start planning by the beginning of July. So is that when you're gonna have to make a decision which way to go?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the virtual graduation is if you wait too long, then you're not going to be able to do it properly, because even in a virtual graduation, we would still want the students to be able to get dressed up, to walk across the stage, to have their names called and whatnot. So we're really hoping throughout the month of June and early July, we're going to be able to figure out statewide if they're going to start lifting the restrictions, and it's likely that we're going to be able to graduate in August. I think if it does become early to mid July, and let's just say things turn for the worse, numbers are starting to creep up again, the opening was going a little bit slower, we'd have to make a decision at that point if it was worth risking not having or not being ready to even have the virtual event. So we are going to have to make some type of a decision by early to mid July. Again, we're hoping the data is going to trend and it's going to continue to allow for the gradual reopening and the phased reopening. But at some point in time, yes, we do need to make a decision. We're just hoping that we have enough data at that point to be able to indicate that we're going to be able to go with a live in-person event.
Okay, great. All right, anybody else have anything on the graduation?
And just that it cannot rain that weekend. I can't deal with rain on top of everything else going on.
This is true. All right, moving on.
Yeah, next item, again, this is something that our staff have really been on a weekly basis. There are a number of different conference calls that take place with different DESE agencies, but the special education group has been meeting every Friday to talk a little bit about the school closure and also what's going to happen over the course of the summer with extended school year programming. And as late as last Friday, the conversation really started to solidify around the summer programs for the special ed students are going to need to be remote this year. It'll be a continuation of the remote learning environment that we've had for the spring. I think at the very best, what is being talked about at the state level at this point is if in the event towards the end of the summer, which I'm reading to be sometime in August, which would be after our summer school concludes, it is possible at some point at the end of the summer that we might get back to some face-to-face, whether it's evaluations, it could be small group tutoring, speech services, things along those lines. It is possible that that may happen towards the end of the summer, but for the purposes of summer planning, because it's a whole hiring component, training for the staff, getting the students registered, we are going to be remote this summer. So Amy Reese, our Director of Student Services, and the special ed chairs have started the process of reaching out to families to let them know that the extended school year program will be remote, to see if students want to participate or not. So they're collecting that information. And any of the students who did have on their IEPs that they have an extended summer component, extended year component, we're obviously going to honor that, but it's going to look very similar to the programming that we currently have in place at the conclusion of the current school year. If we are leaving the door open in the event that, come August, we're able to do any, in-service, face-to-face type meetings, we certainly will endeavor to do so if the IEP calls for it and we have the ability to. But we don't want to set up any false hopes for the summer. The bulk of the programming is really looking like it's going to remain remote.
Any questions on summer school for special education? Jay, how about students that receive services out of district placements, any summer programs, are they still running theirs like Valley and
yeah, I mean, it's really technically school to school at this point. I know it's looking like it's going to be remote even in the out of district placements if they do provide services. The first recommendation, even as far as summer programs went transportation wise, they actually in this current phase it's going to be open for the beginning of the summer is they're not recommending student transportation be a component of any programming. So that is actually going to hurt, even if we had students who wanted to go to an out-of-district placement for the summer in that school. We're actually offering a program. Transportation is not supposed to be involved. So that would be a complicating factor to running the programs. But I actually have a Valley board meeting on Thursday, I believe, this week to get an update with regard to where they are. But I do believe everyone is going remote, even in the out-of-district placements.
Okay, how about like a Camp Paul? Are they doing?
Yeah, it's my understanding, and again, I don't have this firsthand, but I've heard that they're not opening this summer. Again, I don't want to be the one to spread that word, but I have heard that they're not going to be having programming. That's all I know.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have anything on this subject? Okay. All right. Community ed next.
I'm getting text updates as we go. So all of the out-of-district programs are going to be remote as well this summer. So that is done. And we actually do not have an official word from Camp Paul. So that was me just spreading my feeling, I guess, on Camp Paul.
All right.
And lastly, the last little update for you under the regular school closure is I have been having extensive conversations with Robin Adams over at Community Education, and we have come to the decision that we are not going to offer in-person community education programming this summer. There are just too many variables that are coming out from the CDC guidelines, the early childhood care guidelines that are coming along. We really, as a community, need to focus our efforts on trying to prepare for the fall and have that be the first, kind of real, true, safe entry back to school if we can. And I'm going to need all of our staff and supports this summer to really be working on that front. So we are not going to run any in-person community education, which again would be like Summerfest, Summer Quest. A lot of that was also hampered again by the fact that, we're not supposed to be transporting students. We're not doing field trips. Any of those kind of events that were part of the programs really would have been curtailed back dramatically. And then even the number of students who can be in face-to-face, in-person gatherings with a teacher and masks and whatnot just made it very prohibitive to running proper programming this summer. When I was talking with Robin and she was speaking in turn with her staff, they actually have had quite a bit of interest in remote kind of community ed programming that took off a little bit this spring. So a lot of the lessons continued, whether they were music lessons or they were cooking classes and sports type classes. Zumba, I guess, is quite popular. So there was a calling to continue with some of the remote programming over the summer, and I'm okay with that. So I do believe community education is going to be putting together some remote offerings for students and adults. Again, it will not be in person. The pricing model for that is actually very inexpensive, in my opinion. If people are looking for something to do or something to engage their kids for a few hours a day, that is going to be a possibility. But we do need to make the decision and properly notify parents so that they have sufficient time to make plans for the summer. So we are officially not going to be having any in-person ComEd programming this summer.
Okay, any questions on ComEd or comments? Okay, any other questions on updates? This particular item? I just had a question, Jay, in terms of the food, the meals program, when is that officially? And then what are those families' options after that?
Sure, the food program is officially going to end a week from Friday. Friday, June 12th. Is going to be the last evening that the daily food program runs at the high school. So that program has still been operating Monday through Friday nights. They've tweaked the hours a little bit and notified the regular participants on a daily basis with regard to where they were seeing the greatest numbers of individuals served. But that is going to wrap up on the 12th. We will provide all of those families like a handout of various other feeding programs in the area that if they need to avail themselves to, they certainly can. We have started to see the numbers dip a little bit. over the last number of weeks, student-wise. But we will actually make sure that the families that have been coming are notified of other food venues that they may be able to secure meals at. But Friday, June 12th is the last official night of the year.
Okay, anybody else have questions and updates? Maria?
Not a question, but an update. Mrs. Moriarty just reached out and said that after they're doing their packages to send home for Fridays, and you drop off on Wednesdays, as we all know, it's from 9 to 12 that you drop off. Donna, correct me if I'm wrong. I usually go around 9:30 to drop off. She says that they will then go to their Tuesday meal as a grab and go. So they're doing the food for the next 2 weeks, and then it's a grab and go on Tuesdays. Okay?
Right. Any other questions on updates? Go ahead, Donna.
Jay, I want to make sure I was clear. The updates for the individual schools, those are on our website, right, now? So that like anybody can just access them on a weekly
They're
basis?
on the individual schools website,
Okay.
which
All
is a
right.
link off of our website.
Okay, yep, yes, absolutely, great. That's incredibly helpful, thank you.
Sure. There's really a lot of good news, a lot of good information in them with regard to a lot of the events that are taking place at the schools.
Absolutely, and as liaison, I find them very helpful.
Okay,
I have a can I ask one
yeah.
question on this? I think the high school right now doesn't have a newsletter. Is that right, Jay? That I know they've been extremely busy.
What's that?
They've got a lot going on right now. But
Yeah, everyone's been a little bit busy. The high school
Yeah.
typically used to put out some daily updates via email to students. They also, I believe, have been putting out like a monthly update with some of the bigger events going on. But a lot of the communication that comes out of the high school is really directed through email, and it's targeted towards the affected students. So like the emails that have been coming out of the high school directed toward the senior class and senior activities and the prom have actually just been email communications direct to the students and parents, as opposed to like a newsletter that has that information. I think they may be looking at changing their format of the daily and weekly newsletters for next year to use that s'mores format that the other schools have been using because it's been very well received. But right now, they're really just targeting the user groups and emailing direct to parents and students so that nothing gets missed.
One more question for me. I know we've asked it before. In terms of the transitioning students from 4 to 5, 8 to 9, what are we doing with those?
Yeah, actually, a couple of the newsletters started to address that a little bit. I do know that, and again, off the top of my head, I can't tell you exactly which schools were doing which, but a lot of the schools were actually having the staff tape videos of the teams, like introductory type videos. The students are actually this year, because of the uncertainty with the fall, we're not doing a traditional move up where you would go up to the next grade level and meet your teachers and classmates. The assignments for next year are not going to come out until the middle of August. So we're trying to buy ourselves as much time as we possibly can on knowing what the plan for the fall is going to be before we make those decisions, because staff and students could be affected depending on which way we go back. So the staff now are actually going to work on pre-recording those messages. So when you get the announcement in, say, if you're 4th grade going to 5th grade, and you end up being at, McCarthy or Parker on team 1, let's say, that team 1 would have already recorded a message saying, I am Jay, and here's a little information about myself, so that the students could then go to the website and actually watch the introductory message from their team coming in for the fall. And a lot of what we're trying to hope to do is, if we can get back into schools at that point, we've talked to the schools about hosting some extra open houses and kind of meet and greet nights or afternoons at the middle schools and then the high school as well, just to do some touring of the facilities, to be able to possibly make some connections with some of the staff if they're available later in the summer. A lot have been very willing to come back and introduce themselves to kids and do some tours of the buildings. So that's what we're doing at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you.
One other thing, Dennis.
Okay. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I know the high school also, like the freshman mentoring program has been very successful, and kids really look forward to that. I know questionnaires have gone out to the 8th grade students. It's all part of the process of how they kind of match up the incoming freshmen with the upperclassmen. So that work is underway. But again, that wasn't highlighted in the newsletter because it was a direct email communication to the parents and the kids in the 8th grade that they had to fill out the questionnaire to be then matched for 9th grade. So there really is a lot of stuff going on even behind the scenes to try to make the entry in school in the fall as best possible.
All right, anything else under the update item? Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Dennis, I just wanted to point out that mentoring program is an incredible program, and it is under the facet of extracurricular, extra things that they do, and you have to apply to be a mentor. You can only do it when you're at the end of your sophomore year, going into junior year, that you can become a mentor. So it's a special program. They had a lot of applicants this year, and they turned away quite a few people who applied at the high school. I just want to point out and keep us really aware of how important these extracurricular things are, especially at the high school level. And the social emotional component of it is humongous. A lot of the comments I've been receiving are about that. I will share more as we go along on these updates. Would you consider, Jay, that this is your school reopening? No, we're not on that yet, right?
No, we're not there yet.
Okay.
School reopening
All right.
is next.
So I will comment at that point on what I've received. Thank you.
Okay. All right, anybody else on updates for this year? Okay, now we can move on to the next item, which is next year.
That was a long time for one item. So that kind of wraps up what's happening for the end of the current year. And I wanted to just put some bullets together for you to talk a little bit about some of the planning for next year, what's going to be involved with that. So on a positive note, a couple of funding updates for you. So the first one is the town is being allocated some funds under the Federal CARES Act. This was about overall $2.7 billion with a B that was earmarked towards Massachusetts to help with any of the costs as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the state ended up taking about 25% of those available funds at this point and distributing them to municipalities across the state. Chelmsford's allocation of that initial 25% fund is a little over $3.1 million. So that funding actually can be used in the current fiscal year 20 if there were any costs that were incurred on or after, I believe it was March 20th, right around when the pandemic broke and government offices started to shut down, right through June 30th. Or if you don't want to use your money in fiscal 20, there's a provision where you can use it in fiscal 21 up and through the end of December. So when I had a meeting about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago with Town Manager Cohen and his finance team, both of us are really in good shape for the current fiscal 20 that we're in. So we're actually going to apply for a relatively minimal funds in this current year. The only thing that the school department needs to find a revenue source for is the adult meal portion of the feeding program that we did at the high school. The student portion, because we qualified for the almost like the summer feeding criteria, the students were basically eligible for reimbursement and were able to cover our student costs through a DOE federal food grant. But adult meals are not covered under that. So we're basically between March and the end of June estimated to expend about $60,000 of food costs that are not going to be covered under the DOE grant that we need to find a revenue source for. So of the 3.1 million, when I indicated to Paul, the only thing we really needed to try to find a home for was that 60,000. Whatever Joanna kind of finalizes as a number on that for the adult meals, we'll ask for funding in 20, just so that our account basically is clear on June 30th. but both of us want to roll as much money as we possibly can to fiscal 21. The requirements of the funding right now are pretty stringent, that it has to go directly towards any kind of COVID-19 related expense. It really is not supposed to serve as just a filler for like any kind of revenue shortfalls. But there is legislation pending that would actually open that up a bit so that you could potentially use that money to fill some financial gaps. So as we were talking about potentially getting a reduction in state aid, there's potential if we wait till fiscal 21, the legislation will actually pass where we have a little bit more flexibility with that money. So where neither one of us needed a lot of it right now, the plan is to actually roll most of that money to fiscal 21 and then use that next year to either offset some COVID-19 costs with any of the reopening of school, reopening of town offices, police, fire, and emergency services, or potentially fill any kind of budget shortfalls we have if we're allowed to. But I wanted to be able to report that to you because there's been a lot of different names around there, another acronym to think about. We have the CARES Act and the funding that comes with that. But again, we're really going to access very limited funding, about 60,000 in fiscal 20, and we'll work with the town to use most of that money next year. Any questions on the CARES Act?
Yeah. Nope. Okay. All right. Moving on.
Moving on, the next little pocket of money, it's a little bit smaller, but there was an elementary and secondary education emergency relief fund. That was a.
I'm sorry, is that the same as the Ed Stabilization Fund that from the CARES Act?
Yeah, it's the educational offshoot of the CARES Act.
Thank you.
Yep.
I had seen it as the Ed Stabilization Fund. I just want to make sure we were talking about the same thing.
Yeah, it's had a few different names on it, but this comes under the CARES Act, but this was specifically targeted towards school districts.
Okay.
And on this one, there was a portion of the CARES Act money that was actually allocated using the Title I formula for distribution. So Chelmsford's allocation for this fund is just a little over 300,000, 311,000. And this can really be used for just about anything in the budget, which is positive. Now, we have the ability to use this funding in fiscal 20 right now before June 30th, or we can take all or part of it and use it next year in fiscal 21. So as I mentioned earlier, we're really fine in fiscal 20, so we don't have a use for the funds right now. So we're not going to apply for the funding in fiscal 20. We're going to apply for the 311,000 in fiscal 21 after July 1st. So then we'll have $311,000, which we have not allocated within our operating or grant budgets. So I would really like to kind of use that money as a set aside for any kind of reopening type costs that we may have as we start talking about the fall. If we need to talk about, any kind of planning services, procurement of PPEs, any kind of building readiness type funds we may need, this is a nice fund to be able to tap for that. So again, we're doing fine in fiscal 20. We really don't need the money right now. We're going to access the funding in fiscal 21, but that 311,000 is specifically directed towards the school district, and it is not part of the 3.1 million that we talked about previously. So the 3.1 CARES Act, both the town and the schools can access, but this 311,000 is totally separate. So I don't want to confuse the two funding sources.
Any questions, Maria?
Is there any limitation under this 311K on what it's used for? So let's say, for instance, that we needed to use it for professional development, more for teachers for online learning, because that's the way it's going to go, versus, putting more water fountains throughout or more wash stations throughout. Is there a limitation? Is there any kind of, do we know this?
Yeah, not really. This is actually one of the most flexible grants I've ever seen.
Okay. Great.
Come from the government. So
Yep.
we have great flexibility around it.
Okay.
We don't have to access it right now. So we'll actually file the application for fiscal 21. But really anything related to going back to school, whether it's remote learning or it's, again, any procurement of PPEs or building supplies, it's a wide open kind of array of services or equipment that you can purchase from this.
Okay, I have a follow-up if it's okay, Dennis.
Okay.
My follow-up is this, having gone through some of this CARES Act stuff, myself, and they have limits, like, for example, you have to apply by a certain date, in order to get access to this funding. Is this money part of a pool that you have to apply for, or is this already allocated to us as Chelmsford?
So this is considered like an allocation grant. So this
Okay.
is not a competitive grant. So usually when you
Okay.
look at your grant sources, you either have competitive grants and there's a
Mhm.
large pool that the whole state might be competing against,
Yep.
or you have an allocation grant, which is this. So
Okay.
this is again very similar to like our Title I distribution, where there's a pass through from the federal government to the state government. The money is then divvied up based on your population and your need and free and reduced lunch count and L and all that. So this 311 is actually the amount that we're receiving. It's our allocation. It's not competitive.
Thank you.
Okay.
And that kind of answered my question. I was going to ask, is there any risk in applying later for this? So you said we'll apply in July, but obviously if it's an allocation, then there shouldn't be
Right.
any.
Yeah, it's our money. Whether we use it now, we use it next year. So it's not like we're going to lose it.
All right. Any other questions on that? All right. Return to school working group.
Yes, so just a couple of updates on this for you. You're going to start to hear a little bit this week about some surveys that we're putting out. But statewide, so the first part of this little update for you is statewide, there is a approximate 30-member working group that's been assembled to take a look at all of the different pieces of what reentry and reopening in the fall is going to look like. So we are anticipating receiving some draft reports and guidelines for what the reopening is going to look like in mid-June, they're telling us. So what we're going to be convening is basically some parallel working groups in the district. We're not going to even be creative on this one. We're going to call it the Chelmsford Return to School Working Group. We're not going to come up with a new acronym. And that group is basically going to have a larger oversight advisory board. We're going to have the 4 different subgroups because we're going to be receiving the reports based on those 4 different subgroups, which talk about, the physical learning environment, supporting health and social emotional learning needs, what teaching and learning is going to look like, and then operation and maintenance in buildings. So I will be putting out feelers for people who would like to participate on those working groups over the next week or so. We are going to have some surveys that are going to be coming out later on this week to parents as well as students before they leave at the secondary level, so middle school and high school, before you leave for the summer to try to get some feedback about how remote learning went for you. I think, Katrina, you mentioned that the student council is also doing one. So maybe we can look at those results when they come in and see if they correlate with the other survey that we put out. But we want to be able to get some data for these working groups when they convene. I see our working groups and subgroups really getting together in earnest by the end of June, and then over the course of July, taking a look at the state recommendations and Chelmsfordizing them, making them really very Chelmsford specific about what a reentry plan for Chelmsford is going to look like in the fall. So that work is ongoing. We specifically did not start this ahead of time because we really can't do anything until we receive the framework that we have to work within from the state, which isn't going to come until the middle of June. And I think I mentioned at the last school committee meeting, I really just wanted everyone working on closing down the current school year. We've got 2 weeks left. It's been a lot of work for everyone. Staff, parents, the community. This has been a big lift, as I've been saying for a while. So we're going to get through the next 2 weeks. The groups will then start to convene towards the end of June, work right through July. And then I'm obviously committing to provide regular updates to the school committee. I don't know that they'll be weekly, but even over the summer, if we have information on what our various plan options might be, we'll send out communications to families in the community. So that work is going to start going. You are going to start hearing about some surveys going out this week, and we'll be asking people to participate on those panels. on those working groups. We also know that there's a subset of parents and community members who would like to be in the know and just hear about some of our planning, who maybe do not have the time to commit to one of these groups. So we will probably later in July and early August set up some panels, whether they're in person or they're remote, for people to just listen in on the report outs of those committees. We'll record them in a very similar fashion to this, and then we'll be able to link them to our website so that the public can come back and actually watch one of the report outs and help inform themselves on what they should be looking for, what the options we're going to be considering when we come back into school in the fall.
All right. Any questions on reentry plan? Anybody? Oh, Maria, sorry.
It's not a question. One of the comments that was sent, and Jay was copied on this, was from Mrs. McKinnon, Sue McKinnon. She's a first grade teacher at Center School for many years. When she retired from that position. And she sent us an email that she actually also sent to part of the working group on the return to school at the state level. And what she is saying is she's very much in favor of a reopening. She talked about the emotional and social impact, especially on the younger learners, not to have that face-to-face and in-person connection with a teacher, and to consider that. She talked about it at all levels of learning, but especially for the younger children, and the psychological impact of not being able to return to school physically. It's a very detailed and well thought out comment that she made, which I think we should pass along to the working groups when we have it. But she did say that already. Okay.
All right. Anybody else questions? In terms of these working groups, what do you envision? Like, who do you envision being part of these work groups? How many people do you envision being in these groups, making these decisions?
A lot.
Okay.
The larger kind of steering committee for the work, I'm going to guess is going to be somewhere between 12 and 15 people. So you don't want it to become so unruly that you can't get any work done. And then the individual groups, I would say it's probably going to be 6 to 8 people in a working group. But we are going to be very specific and make sure that we have the right representation of people in the groups. So we're going to obviously invite staff at all levels of the district to be involved. If we end up having, say, too many staff in one particular area, I might need to shift some to another working group. Like I know that I'm going to need some nurses and the the nursing coordinator on the one that deals with back to school health and safety type things. So we are going to have to pick and choose a little bit about the players and which groups we think they'd be best on. But I would think about 6 to 8 members per working group and an overarching group of like 12 to 15. They don't necessarily need to be the same people either. So we might be able to get some good representation on both. And then if there are gaps that we identify, I certainly will just reach out to different groups if I think they can be helpful to us, and ask if they might be able to have someone help and serve on the group with us.
Okay, great. Any other questions, Jonna?
Jade, it's kind of a three-parter sort of. The first one is, I think one of it's not really three-parter.
You're circumventing the rules, aren't you, Donna?
I'm sorry.
I know. I get it.
It's more that I think that we have to remind people that we still have to follow what the governor's guidelines are. So
Right.
And I'm wondering is in each meeting that we're having and we're getting this update that maybe we make sure that people understand where we're at in that process in terms of these are the governor's guidelines. So this is what we're working with right now. And then with regards to guidelines, there's been a lot of guidelines that have been coming out, from the CDC and things like that. And those are just guidelines. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to necessarily follow them to the letter. But, I think the people need to be able to understand how to make that differentiation between what the governor orders expects us to do and what the CDC guidelines are, or any other guidelines that come out, DESI guidelines, and whatever. And then the third part is, are we working with the other schools in this area? You know, I mean, I'm trying to think, like, you know, are we coordinating our efforts with other school districts to have some type of similar plan in some way?
Let me start at the part 3 and work my way back. So yes, I mean, we actually, we do regionally, you know, we do a lot of work with the Merrimack Valley Superintendent's Association. Linda, myself, we have different working groups on that have worked through, you know, curriculum logistics. What is remote learning going to look like? We looked a little bit in March around the regionally when we weren't getting real clear direction from the state with regard to the closure. You know, as a group, we got together and said, we really feel like we need to do something here. We came out with the 2-week closure. So there is a lot of that work that is still going to be ongoing, so that you kind of do see a regional flair to what's happening. A conference call I was on today with the commissioner, and again, I think part of the frustration is that at the state level, you've obviously got the governor kind of trying to dictate and make recommendations that apply to the whole, you know, public and every industry that falls under it. And then you have, say, for education, you've got the commissioner of ed and DESI, who are kind of pushing very industry-specific recommendations and guidelines for schools, and other people pushing them for, say, restaurants and daycares and right down the line. So, you know, it's not really clear until it almost gets from the state level down to the, say, the Department of Ed level. And then we're trying to figure out how much autonomy we're going to have as a district compared to, you know, what we're basically going to be told is the framework we have to work within at the state level. On the call today, I think we would all agree that we actually had a lot of autonomy throughout the course of the spring, and we actually didn't have a lot of clear direction from the state with regard to, you know, how to implement remote learning, you know, when to do it, what formats. The commissioner indicated today that he actually sees that being a little more prescribed in the fall, that there won't be quite as much variability from district to district, just because we're going to be able to take the summer and really kind of look at what went well, what didn't, and kind of lay out a plan for all districts. So it will be interesting to me to see in mid-June when we get that framework from the state exactly what we're working within. Obviously, there's then going to be an individual district, you know, kind of identity that comes from that. But you know, I can tell you, even on the work that's being done about, you know, the going back to school, you know, it's the all ends of the spectrum from, you know, we're going to continue 100% remote learning because we can't re-enter the buildings, all the way to, you know, we're 100% back in the buildings like nothing ever happened, and, you know, it's school as normal. And then in between, there's all different hybrids of, you know, I've heard, you know, by trying to reduce the numbers in buildings, a recommendation may be, you know, to split your class and to have a week on for the A group, a week off for the B group, and do a combination of in-person learning, remote learning. So it's a little bit all over the place. And again, that's why we want to wait for the guidelines from the state. It really wouldn't make sense for us to jump ahead and do something on our own, or even just us and a couple of other local districts doing something on our own before we know what parameters we have to work within from DESI. But I do think, you know, they say mid-June, even if it's late June, that we get the guidelines. If we can get them, you know, before the 4th of July, and we can really then spend July digging into what it's going to look like for us, I think we'll be in good shape.
Okay. Donnie, you have a follow-up?
No, just I was looking at the working groups, and one of the things that I'm wondering is where in this we're going to put staffing. So, you know, like I'm thinking, like, what if we have teachers who have small children who are on, you know, a different type of plan in a different district? You know what I'm saying? Like, how are we going to make, you know, adjustments? Or what if we have someone who becomes, you know, who tests positive, for example? You know, what are we going to do about that? And is that going to be addressed under one of these working groups?
Yeah, the quick answer is I don't know. And yes, that needs to get fleshed out through these working groups. But those are the exact same things that every district is struggling with. You know, what if you have some students in the fall who, for whatever reason, you know, don't or can't return to school because of health issues, health concerns? You could also have staff fall within that same bracket. What does in-person or remote learning look like for the teacher? Are they home 1 week, working a week? What does that do for daycare, even for their own kids, if they have their own kids and they don't live in town? And like you said, they may live somewhere else. So these are all variables that these groups are working through now. And we're going to have answers to those before we launch our plan for the fall.
Okay, other questions? Yep, Maria?
On the work groups, do you envision staff, you said staff,
Right.
are you going to be calling on other people in the community as well, such as parents and students, to be part of these working groups? What is your thought on this?
Yeah, parents, I definitely can see playing a role in these.
Mhm.
I'm not 100% certain, to be honest with you, with students.
Okay.
I could see, in large groups of parents and certainly students in the focus groups.
Mhm.
But I honestly, I'm not there yet. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I think I'd be more apt to think that a lot of the parent participation and certainly when we say students, I'm thinking more like high school and, maybe middle school students. I don't see elementary school students being involved. But, your upper middle and high school students for feedback and input.
Mhm.
Yes, I can see that in one of these phases.
Okay, great. I think it's really important to involve these groups because you need the buy-in. The other thing is that we've been tremendous in our online learning in the last couple of months. We have shifted over and done a good job, but there is going to be catch-up. And I think that that's one of the reasons the state is going to have to standardize, because there have been so many differences among districts. So we're dealing with public education. And so they're going to have to definitely standardize this to some extent. I think our district's response has been tremendous. So I will keep it at that, but tell you that I think if you can get parents and students involved to a large extent, you'll get a great buy-in.
I agree.
I just want to say I agree totally. I think that's a great idea. I like the idea of parents in the focus groups especially. So.
A question maybe for Linda. Are we doing any special professional development over the summer to help teachers in case we are back to this online learning and using technology more so and all these different things? Are we planning anything as far as that's concerned?
Yeah, so a couple of things with the professional development. So we already have a few courses set up in regards to just even like the blended learning piece. One of them was the Fitchburg State credit course that we had our teachers that were starting to get the one-to-one initiative, as well as a small module piece. We can have some of those courses looked at. So whether it's a 15 PDP module or, eventually we could then branch out, obviously using Fitchburg State for a larger course. That would be just completely remote learning, because here's the difference. You have remote learning, which is what we're doing, but then there's distance learning, and distance learning is completely different. That's a complete online program that is your coursework. So we'd have to make sure we make those definitions and distinctions before we ended up, moving forward with something. One of the things I did discuss with the central office team is, we have money set aside for some of the summer work that happens and professional development. And I have plenty of money that will be coming in too from the Title II grant. We just thought we'd hold back and find out what it is we actually have to do. And once we get that under our belts, we'll be more than happy to look at what we currently have for programming and then tweak it to be able to offer to all the teachers. When we went to the remote learning process, one of the first things that happened through the TIS and the technology department was all of the training online. What does that look like? So we took those, even if it was just the first week or so, a lot of work happened behind the scenes. And then throughout these past 12 weeks, 13 weeks actually at this point, the TIS come up with different PD sessions each week to offer teachers to jump on. So if they wanted to learn about a new add-on that was on Google Classroom, they could do that. If they needed somebody to take a step back with them and go through some of the main steps that happen with Google Classroom, they would do that. If teachers had a calling for something else that they needed some support with, that was happening. One of the other things that's happening right now too, is we'll put it out for the teachers, is just other PD opportunities. So the department coordinators have gone through and they're starting to populate a sheet similar to what the parents received in that first week, which had like by grade level, all of the activities that kids could do, and we'll be refurbishing that as well. But they were doing the same for the teachers by grade level, right? What is available, what's accessible, what's free, for you to go on, and what's appropriate for Chelmsford, because there's a lot of free PD going on, but it may not be anything that's appropriate for what we're currently doing. So we're just going to take our, time to put some of those things together and put it out for the teachers.
Great, thank you.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Long way to get to yes.
All right, any other questions on reentry planning?
It's not a question, but Sudeep and
Yep.
I have to go, but we want to
Okay.
say thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Good seeing you guys.
You too.
Yeah,
All right,
Dennis, I have to go
next-
too. I'll catch you at the next meeting.
What's that?
I said I have to go too. I'll catch you at the next
Okay.
meeting.
Bye, Jay.
Linda's pushing out the door.
Yeah.
All right, so next is transportation.
Yes, thank you. This is still under my, the reentry memo, but
Right.
this is just the next bullet point on there.
Yeah.
So this is just an area that I think we need to, I want to just kind of put out there for you. We do not need to have, extensive dialogue tonight, but I think it would be worthwhile talking about it at a coming meeting. But so I'm flagging this for a couple of different reasons for you, just to give you some sense of scope and one of the issues that we're going to be dealing with. So we currently contract with North Reading Transportation, NRT, for our regular ed, the big school buses that you see in town. We currently use 29 large buses each day to transport our students. So each bus performs 3 runs in the morning. They do a high school run, a middle school run, an elementary school run, and then they do 3 runs in the afternoon, reverse, high school, middle, elementary. Then they do extra runs for like the after school programs and sports teams and things like that. But we basically contract for the 29. And we're transporting, we have 5,000 students in the district. We're transporting just under 3,400 students, which is a large number of kids that we're transporting grades K through 12. So we have not been providing transportation services since we left school. So Friday, March 13th was our last day of in-person schooling. And then so Monday the 16th right through June 16th, we have not been utilizing the school buses. By not utilizing the school buses or having them run, we're basically have saved $1.1 million in non-performance because they haven't been running since March. So I'm flagging this for 2 different reasons for you. One, when we get a little bit later in the agenda and we talk about how we might solve some of the budget reduction for fiscal 21 that we're being asked to make, I'm recommending to you, bless you, I'm recommending to you that we actually expend that $1.1 million in savings in the fiscal 21 budget. And I'll get into this in the budget transfers a little bit later, to prepay tuition now that will then be able to reduce the 21 budget by that $1.1 million. So that's going to be a considerable chunk in trying to close our budget gap for next year. But we know, and this is just the other reason I'm flagging this for you, we know that transportation is going to be an issue in the fall based on whatever the social distancing guidelines are. Some communities, I want to touch on this though. So when we do talk a little bit later, obviously we've saved about $1.1 million by not running our buses. The bus companies, NRT and the other ones that are out there, some of them have actually been able to basically structure deals with their communities where they have still received, a portion all of the their invoicing, even if they haven't been performing, because there's a concern in some communities that particularly if we had to go back to school, so in March, if we were going back to school in April, if transportation companies weren't being paid, bus drivers got laid off, collected unemployment, would you be able to get them back and have continuity in service and start right back up again? So a lot of different districts, for fear of that, ended up still paying their bus companies some or all of the money that was due to them, even though they weren't performing the service. Obviously, when we then went out to June, it was a little bit of a different situation. You still had some communities that had come to terms to continue to pay bus companies. Some struck different deals where they're paying a lesser percentage. And then some, like us, haven't been paying anything. I personally, again, from my perspective and my training, I don't like to pay for a service that we haven't received. So my recommendation to you is to not pay the transportation bills because we don't have that service. Within our contract, we have very clear language that's in our favor that basically indicates if the buses don't run, you don't pay for the service. So if us or any other community were basically kind of cutting a deal with the transportation companies to pay for the services, it's basically a deal is what it is to try to, maintain that service level in the fall. But I don't know because, again, these transportation companies are private companies. You're still cutting a deal with a private company that you really don't have any leverage over whenever we do go back to school. So that I do want to put out there for you because you probably will hear some communities that have been paying their transportation vendors and some haven't. But obviously, in my thinking and in my recommendation, I'm recommending later on this evening that you use that savings to help offset the budget cut from the budget reduction for next year. And then lastly, before we have a little talk about this, we do have to start talking about the fall because we know transportation is going to be an issue regardless of what happens when we go back to school. If we can't put as many students on buses because we have to space them out differently, we have to alternate seats, things like this, we don't really have, number one, financial capacity to increase the number of buses we have. And I certainly don't think we're going to be able to get more buses given the just the dynamics of all school systems kind of being in this hurdle. So there are some school systems, I don't know if the state is going to grant any relief on this, but there are some school systems that are looking to basically minimize the amount of transportation that they provide. School systems are only required by statute to transport students in grades kindergarten through 6. So you do not have to transport students in grades 7 through 12. So if you didn't transport students in grades 7 to 12 on buses, you potentially then would need less buses to run your fleet for your K to 6 kids. And you could use the extra buses to basically better balance and separate the kids who you have to provide transportation to, even if you kept the 29 buses. So like that's one possibility. Another one would be to actually just cut your buses down as a cost savings measure. You'd have to see if it would actually work out distancing wise. But there are some districts that are looking to do that to basically provide them some flexibility. There are other districts out there, and I'm just throwing these out as things we need to consider. I am going to, as we get ready for the fall, I am going to survey parents to just see, with the concerns of COVID and infection spreading and things like this, even if you're eligible for or normally would have paid to ride the bus, do you intend to have your child ride the bus in the fall? Because I don't want to be creating routes or saving spots on buses for parents who are now going to decide that they would rather transport their child on their own as opposed to putting them on a school bus, if that can help us with our numbers on the buses. So transportation is going to be a huge factor, one way or the other in this. It's certainly going to be a large discussion in the operational subgroup of the working group. And this is something that's already being talked about statewide. But I just want to flag for you some of the different topics I think we should talk about at upcoming school committee meetings to get the flavor from the community and the parents with regard to, number one, do they have concerns about using busing? Would they use it even if it's available? What do parents think? What does the community think? What does the committee think about potentially limiting, the number of riders we even provide transportation to? I don't know how that would go over. I don't have a recommendation on any of these right now. I'm just throwing out concepts that are being talked about in other communities. And I think it's at least worth having that dialogue because transportation is going to be a huge issue, one way or the other come fall because of the just the size of the vehicles, the number of kids on vehicles, how we're turning over the vehicles 6 times a day, what's cleaning going to look like between runs. And there's just a lot of logistical issues with with transportation. I was actually a little surprised, just as a side note, that even the recommendations that came out around the summer school and, going back to any kind of summer programming to not include transportation, even for special education students. That's almost unheard of. You don't typically see that come out as a recommendation. So I'll be just curious to kind of see where that goes. But this is not unique to Chelmsford, but I just think it's at some point we probably should have these discussions and at least get some feedback on these issues.
Hey, anybody have any thoughts or any questions on transportation at this point? Donna?
Jay, so just getting back to the whole our contract with the bus companies.
Yep.
So on the 27th of March, the Department of Education on their desktop report, that's what it's called, on the desktop, actually recommended that school systems pay the bus companies. And then my understanding from the relief fund is that's what that money was designed for, was to reimburse transportation cost, or to pay transportation costs, to these bus companies, even though they weren't necessarily providing the services. And while I don't disagree with what you're saying, I also don't want to find ourselves in trouble down the road for doing something that we didn't end up doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when this originally came out, a lot of this, I guess, kind of push or recommendation guidance was coming from DESE, and the Commissioner of Education felt very strongly. I think he was concerned, and he certainly has valid points that if we're out of school for only 3 or 4 weeks, and you don't have that continuity of service when we have to go back to school, that's potentially an issue. He certainly has, in the beginning and to this date, has recommended communities do that for continuity of service. But the recommendation really kind of flies against everything on the business side of DESE. And, we had been told that, week after week after week, there'd be, written guidelines coming out saying to go ahead and do this. And that's the recommendation, where legally there's actually a statute that indicates you cannot pay for services that aren't rendered. And, that's certainly kind of a standing principle within the business operating world of DESE. So there's never been a guiding document or anything in writing actually authorizing that payment. It's really just the recommendation of the commissioner. It's his personal recommendation. The bus company and some of the bus company lobbying groups have certainly been pressuring the legislation to basically allow districts to be able to pay even without providing the service. The bill that was created in the Senate, passed the House, back in the Senate, basically at best would just make it permissible on a district by district basis to make that decision. It would basically absolve them of the statute that says you can't do it, but it still leaves it to be a local decision. I honestly, when I look at the budget situation we're in, and I look at having to reduce $1.4 million for next year's operating budget, I had a conversation, a very frank conversation with the transportation company owner the other day. I said, I can't justify paying $1.1 million in services we didn't receive to then go back and have to reduce $1.1 million of staff or services from our operating budget. It just doesn't fly for me. I understand the predicament he's in. I think if there is special federal legislation or even state legislation for this transportation, it should be earmarked directly for that. I think if it ends up coming through the legislation, I do not believe anything is passed yet. If it comes through the legislation that it's just permissible, that's still going to be a local decision about whether you want to use your CARES Act money for that or not. But I think that's going to be a big issue in communities. How do you justify paying a bill for a service you didn't receive to a private company to basically sustain a private operation? I don't, begrudge the companies for trying. I think they should be trying to, lobby for some kind of legislative relief, whether it's on the state or the federal level. I personally just don't think that relief should be coming from the town or the school districts themselves when we have competing interests.
And as I said, I don't disagree. I just don't want to get caught down the road, having to owe money to these bus companies, after we've committed for that money to be used in other places.
Yeah, I don't have a concern that you'd owe money to the bus company because again, the contract is tight and they have not provided the service. I think the concern or I wouldn't call it a threat, but the concern out there is that, if you don't pay for the transportation companies, we can't guarantee you service in the fall. And I think, that's certainly something we're going to have to look at. And I think every district is going to have to look at because now you have a transportation industry that's basically been out of business and not delivering services for 5 or 6 months. It's not just one vendor. I know they're a very large vendor in the mix, but there are a lot of smaller kind of mom and pop shops out there who are having difficulty, paying their lease payments on buses and insurance for not running and operating costs and things like that. The whole transportation world could be really kind of shaken up in the fall when we do end up going back to school. And I still can't tell you at this point in time what going back to school in the fall is going to look like. I think that's the other concern that I think we have to just kind of keep in mind. I'm not concerned about, using the money for one way now and then having to pay for something later. I think my only concern is around it's the continuity of service in the fall. But I think, one way or the other, that's just something that we have to deal with.
Okay. Thank you.
Maria, you had a question?
Yeah, it's about this as well. In terms of the contract, just because sometimes there are other clauses that are more important when there are events like this within that contract. So I just want to make, and I'm sure there are other school districts that have the same type of contract in place. I just want to make absolutely sure that what Donna said is important to me too. I mean, I don't want to be looking at 1.1 million that, we're allocating for something else and now here we have to go and pay it. So have we looked at this legally? In other words, has somebody reviewed these clauses and made sure that we're standing on really good legal ground on the enforcement of these clauses?
Yeah, I've actually had conversations with Andy, your attorney, as well as his firm, because his firm has actually represented other districts in trying to reach some settlement agreements with other communities to pay a portion of bills for continuity of services. I can tell you that even in other communities, the claim has not been that you owe us money because of the contract. It's more that, we want you to pay something so that we can maintain your service going forward. I don't think they have a strong legal argument as far as making a case to be paid for a service that wasn't rendered. But I did review our contract language with Andy. We feel we're on very solid ground as far as that's concerned. It was just a matter of, again, I don't recommend you negotiate a lesser rate or really pay anything for something you didn't receive. When other districts are, they feel differently, and they've advised their attorneys to try to strike a deal for something less than the full amount to pay for a service or to pay a vendor to basically hope that there's continuity of service in the fall when schools reopen.
All right. Anything else on transportation?
One more thing. So, Jay, as I'm thinking about this, I can see this kind of cascading effect. Let's say that we, for example, reduce our transportation services or eliminate them. Parents may then who rely on those services as a result of their work schedules, for example, they may use more extended day. I don't even know if we're going to have extended day care, in the schools and things like that. As I said, I'm kind of running through a lot of things in my mind, and so I'm assuming that in addition to as part of the transportation conversations that we're having, we're also taking a look at what the impact on families will be in terms of, as I said, parents working and other children or things like that.
No, that is certainly a concern. I'm just throwing out these topics because I think they warrant a discussion at least. I will be working to just try to get some data to inform that discussion. and just reach out to parents to even figure out, if they were previously a transportation rider, is that something they're even still going to entertain? Because I mean, that could help us in the decision. But if we end up going into school in the fall, and let's say there's a recommendation that's going to, because of social distancing and capacity on buses and whatnot, that is either going to, if we want to maintain servicing everyone grade K to 12 like we're doing now, let's say our runs doubled in time. Because to do that, we had to put less kids on a bus, and we had to account for cleaning between runs and things like that. How does the community and parents feel about, a 25-minute bus run now being 50 minutes? The other thing that could end up happening is, what if instead of 29 buses, we really needed 40 buses because we needed to distance. We don't have another $2 million anywhere to add to that. And I think, number one, I don't think we could even pull it off and get the buses and the drivers to begin with. But there could be a cost there that just hasn't been factored into the budget. That would be extremely difficult to deal with. So again, I just put it out there because I know other districts are basically at this point, it's like all things are open for discussion, and these are things that they're considering.
Well, I will say this. I mean, we're just talking about transportation here, and I hope that people can appreciate. In this one, issue, how many moving parts there are just in transportation.
Right.
Therefore, the enormity of what it is that we are being asked to do is staggering, to be perfectly honest with you.
Right. Yeah, and just to your point, John, I agree wholeheartedly. Transportation is like a sub-issue of one of the 4 working groups. We're going to have hours and hours and hours of discussion on each of these topics, and really, kind of put together best laid plans for the fall. But this is a lot of heavy work that lies ahead.
All right. Any other questions on transportation?
Where's Jeff? Jeff, you still have a chance to withdraw your name. No, I'm only kidding. It's crazy. There's going to be a lot of work ahead. Donna's point is a very important point, and so is Jay's. There was a lot of work ahead of us. And so these working groups, I am glad that you're going to put this together. It's very important. Thank you. The transportation thing, I think the survey is, you really should, because I've heard from several parents already, there's no way my kid's getting on a bus, even if school reopens.
Right. But it's going to be good data to get. And then we can use that at an upcoming meeting to, inform the discussion.
Just, I guess, jump in the gun. Is this going to impact the collection of bus fees? I know that's going to come up. We're going to ask people to pay bus fees, not knowing if we're going to need buses.
Well, how about we address that when we get there? But I'll tip it off on you. Yes.
Yeah.
But I think we need to go through that. We need to go through the motions to start, figuring out who is actually going to register for buses. We have traditionally always provided that early bird registration period with a little bit of a reduction. So we still want to maintain that for families, because we got a late start on this because we're just trying to close down the school year. When we get there and talk about it, I would recommend going ahead and doing it, taking the fees in the event that we ever had to process reimbursements, we would process reimbursements. But I think unless we actually get the data, that would really hamper putting efficient routes together for the fall with regard to whatever we decide. So I don't think it makes sense to wait, because if we wait too long, the catch-up period will be too long to really make decisions on the fall routes.
All right, so we'll cover that in a couple minutes. All right, so anything else on reentry? Okay. All right, the next thing then is the employee handbook revisions.
Yeah, so next item on the agenda this evening is every year we come back to the school committee with some recommendations for some additions, some revisions and updates to the employee handbook, which gets circulated to all of our staff when they return to school in the fall. So Cheryl Kirkpatrick in our personnel office has provided you with a copy of the 2019, the current year handbook, and then she used track changes to show you where they've made updates. The vast majority of this is really updating the links to the various school committee policies. The previous time this policy, the employee handbook was approved, is when we had our own policy manual. We didn't have the MASC one. So the policies weren't actually linked within the online manual. So her and her staff have gone through and actually linked all the different policies to the current MASC policy manual, which I think is good. A lot of this is just very useful information for staff as far as like updated, health insurance and dental rates and things like that. So everything is really all together in one document. So the first attachment was a kind of a redlined copy of the 2019 handbook. And then she accepted all the changes just so that you could read the 2020 as a clean read copy. But it's the same base. It's just with and without track changes. And this is the document that I'd sent to you separately in Word, just because I always find it a little bit easier to navigate Word than Google when looking at the changes. So this is just those documents converted to a PDF is what you have in your packet tonight. But I would recommend you you basically accept the changes as presented to the employee handbook for 2020.
Okay, any questions or comments?
Yeah, I do. I'm sorry. Page 26 of the actual handbook, the final version. I don't think it's the same on the redacted type of version. On page 26, you talk about translations for families. And it says it's going to take up to a week to fulfill, but I think we have a new translation service where people can they don't have to go, they have an actual service available, right? We bought that?
Yeah, that the translation service that we subscribe to is voice translations.
Right, but this is about both. I thought about that too. In an effort to communication with families, that's what we're trying to do with that translation service. We will translate documents, that's fine, into their native language and provide an interpreter when necessary. This takes both things into consideration, not just about documents. Documents I can understand up to 1 week.
Right.
But having to deal with a parent and, talking to a parent and so on, 1 week is a long time if there's an issue. So that service that you bought will just allow the parent to speak with the teacher or whoever needs to talk to that parent immediately.
Maria, I think it's just because it says may take up to a week because that's
Right.
the in-person interpreter. There are some people like Language Live. Yes, we can call right now and have an instantaneous interpreter to speak to.
Right.
If you want an
Yeah.
in-person one, that is going to take a little bit more time. It could take upwards of a week. So I think I think it was worded such as may take up to a week. That's just in the off chance we have to get a face-to-face person, that just people are aware that it's going to take a little bit of time. That doesn't preclude us from accessing the Language Live, and not that we would not access the Language Live program that we purchase. You just don't want to lead people in the wrong direction, thinking they're going to be able to get an interpreter face-to-face within 24 hours or instantaneously. I think that's why it was worded that way.
Okay, so can we add in some language there that says something like, except that Language Live is available for non-in-person and non-document translation? In other words, make people aware as a staff member or whoever this handbook is going towards, that is available, because that is a very important new thing that you have for the EL learners.
Yeah, and
Really
I think that's why we have everything going through Kelly Rogers, because she would say, no, we'll have somebody right
Yeah.
away. Get them
You
for
have her name in there, you do.
So just so we manage it, I don't know if you have to get that in depth to be like, we have this program and we have that program. I mean, Kelly's pretty responsive, and most people are going to their principals anyway, who already know that we have these services. So I don't think that's going to interrupt any services for parents. This is an employee handbook. So if it was parents that weren't sure, that would be, a little bit timely for them. That might be concerning, but for our staff, we're going to be able to get to our staff pretty quickly, because there's not going to be one staff member that's not going to go to their building principal if they need services.
All right.
If it's a problem, we can change it down the road, but I don't anticipate it being a problem. And so far, we haven't. We've been using that program pretty frequently, and it's been, nobody seems to be lost and not knowing who to go to and when to go to them.
I know that when I've used interpreters in the past in meetings that they needed to be present, it does take a little time to schedule them.
Absolutely. But this doesn't distinguish. This makes no distinguishing. It's okay, as long as everybody on the staff is being told this is available, no matter if it's a counselor, if it's a psychologist, if it's a teacher in the EL room, if it's a regular room teacher, whatever, as long as they all realize that, that's fine with me. But, you know, that is something that should be communicated. If this handbook is intended to communicate that, because it mentions Kelly by name, and she could change as well, right? So department coordinated, it's very specific about Kelly Rogers, which is fine with me because I think Kelly does a wonderful job. But, you know, that could change at some point too. Language Live is available as well for other type, you know, immediate interpretation. So
Kelly's not allowed to go anywhere. Kelly's staying with us for a very long time. I had her sign in blood. She's fine. She's good.
She's a great person, but Language Live is available, and that is immediate translation, which is so important right now.
All right, other questions on the handbook? Are there any other, I mean, most of the changes look like they're just updates and policies and dates. Anything substantial in there that I missed or anybody missed?
I mentioned earlier, the only real substantial changes are just that we now have the school committee's policy manual through MASC. And so we didn't previously have links in the document to the online document. So you've already approved the MASC policies. It's really just hyperlinking this document properly. Those were the major changes. There really weren't anything significant this year.
Okay, because we did make a couple of tweaks in it during the course of this past year, right? With the union, we had little negotiations with them.
Well, yes,
Something
but that had already been approved. So that's
Okay,
included
yes.
in the 2019 base document.
Okay,
So yeah, so nothing actually changed in that section at all.
okay, great. All right, so I'll take a motion to accept the revised handbook.
I make, oh, was there a comment?
John,
I make a motion to approve the 2020 Teacher's Handbook as presented.
Second,
all right. Any other questions or comments on the employee
I'm
handbook?
sorry, Dennis.
Yeah, go ahead.
This has been reviewed by council. This is part of the whole thing that was the draft back and forth. Is that right? Okay, because this creates a policy, so I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you.
I mean, the council reviewed the base document, but like the council didn't, all we did was link the hyperlink the document to the current policies, but the current policies are already approved by you and the attorneys. The only thing this document is doing is embedding links within the document to your own policies.
Okay, so the previous document has already been approved. So the handbook itself has already been approved by council
The base
and
document,
reviewed.
correct.
Okay, so the links you're pretty sure are all correctly linked. We're good.
Yeah, the links are correctly linked now, right? And they're only linking to your own policies.
Okay,
All right, any other questions before we take a vote? Okay, seeing none, Donna Newcomb,
aye.
Doherty,
Aye.
Ben Moses,
Aye.
Maria Santos,
I,
myself, aye, so 5-0. Okay, back around to transportation.
Thank you. You know what I'm actually going to do is, because I've been talking a lot tonight, I'm going to take a break and let Joanna kind of run you through this information. In the end, we can come back and have a chat, but as I kind of prefaced it, I do think it's worthwhile approving these tonight to allow people to start with the process, start letting us know if they intend to use transportation or not. Again, this would be good data to get when we start making decisions later on this summer. And in the event that, you know, we ever accepted someone's registration and we ended up making a change to eligibility or who we wanted to transfer, we obviously would just reimburse someone if they had paid. We wouldn't be looking to take their money for the year and not give it back. But Joanna, do you mind kind of walking us through these documents you presented and share them with the committee?
Sure. So there's 3 transportation documents. One is kind of a look back this past school year. The next one is the rates. I'm asking the committee to approve, and they're the same, just a couple of date changes. And then the third is the flyer that we, put on the website and we, have out at the registration desk and that. So the first document, again, is looking back at this past year. And as Dr. Lang said, we had 3,385 riders this year, taking 29 buses with the 3 runs. And then the fees, just kind of a reminder, the only people who do not have to pay a fee is if you're K to 6 over 2 miles. And that's because of what's in the regulations about what a district is required to provide. Everybody else pays a fee. And then the big message that we've been giving through the years now is, even if you don't have to pay a fee, we need you to register. And that's so we know where you are, we know where you live, and we can build efficient, safe bus routes and bus stops. Then the next section talks about people registering. And again, this is a look back, and this is to remind everybody of registering early. And then, so last year we had a big majority register before the start of school. But then we had that spike in August where close to 600 students registered. And that's gone down each year, which is good. The sooner we know about you, the better. And then the last section is just a little refresher about how many buses we had by school, how many students were on the bus. And then the summary is just a little bit about how we do, we build the routes, we mail the bus passes to the homes in mid-August. And this says where your bus number and your bus stop and time they're going to pick you up and the time you should be home. And that all this stuff is also in X2 for families to look this up, or someone at the school to look up to help a student remember what bus they're on. And that, our transportation coordinator, Peter Bacalus, coordinates all this. And from beginning to end, he helped me write this and got the updated data. And then just a reminder that the first day of school is September 1st this year, and we'll have everything out hopefully in mid-August. So families will be prepared at the start of school with riding the bus. So any questions on kind of the look back to this school year? Okay. The next one is the fee structure that we ask the committee to vote on every year. And again, nothing changed, but except the dates a little bit, because it's just a slight extension of the early bird rate, which is $175, and then a max of a family cap of 400, and that rate would be between now and July 5th. And then the regular fee for the month of July would be $200 with a family cap of $500. And then if you register after August 1st, it goes to $225 and still the same family cap of $500. And then if you come to Chelmsford in February or beyond, it's $100. So any questions on the fee structure? Jay, do you want to take the vote at the end?
Yeah, what do you recommend, Dennis?
Yeah, we'll take the vote at the end. If after any questions or anything or concerns.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the last handout is just the flyer with the little bus on top, and kind of says the same thing that was in the more detailed memo, but it's meant to be a little easier to see on the website, or that. Again, it just stresses that where it is on the website, you register online, same system, MCC, eSchool, rate structure. Again, reminding people, please register even if there's no fee. We need to know about you. It talks a little bit about people who are eligible for no free and reduced lunch people. There's a little way to self-identify yourself as that so that you don't pay the $175 or the $200. And then just a little recap again about the timing and when we're going to build the routes, when we're going to set the stops. And then remember, if we do need to add bus stops later on, once we know about the whole pool of students, we'll do so after the start of school and try to do that all at once rather than just adjusting stops every day.
Okay, anybody have any questions or concerns on the bus fees or the collection schedule? Point.
Yep.
Maria?
Okay, so first, I think a lot of parents this year, I know what our goal is. Our goal, and like you did last year, is to try to get as many people registered as you can so you know what it looks like in the fall. To try to figure out how many people are going to actually use the system. The problem this year is that when you look at this, one, a lot of parents don't know what's happening with return to work. The same way that they don't know about return to school, they don't know about return to work. And the second thing is that they don't know what transportation looks like in the fall. So because they don't, why would they register early, even if it's for a reduction of 25 or 50 bucks or 100 bucks? So if it's not refundable, if they don't like the way the transportation looks in the fall, I'm not sure we can accomplish our goal that people are just going to sign up and pay that fee now, knowing that it may not be refundable and they're getting a system that they don't want to put their child on the bus for, and it's not refundable. So whereas before we had this goal and it was a great goal and you accomplished a lot of it, even though you got about half of your registrations only in August, you still got a lot of them pre-done. I think this year is tough for parents to make that decision right up front, knowing that there's no refund coming their way. They themselves don't know what they're going to be. They also don't know what it's going to look like in the fall. This is my input on this.
Jay, any?
What, do any of the other committee members want to say anything first?
In regards to that, no.
Okay. I think this is going to be a very difficult year for all of us, but if we don't try to gather information on who may want to ride the bus for the fall, we're never going to know. And, if, again, the spectrum is complete remote learning to we're going back in September like nothing ever happened before. So I think we have to almost kind of prepare for if the buses all rolled and we knew who actually wanted transportation, if we were going to school in a full school scenario, we need to know kind of that worst case scenario so that we can then make routes and have the sufficient buses and all of that in our transportation planning. If a parent, is, because again, we can't, take a fee, fix routes based on that, and then have a parent say, well, I've decided not to ride the bus after we've just routed the bus and, we have X number of buses on a route for that. If a parent is concerned that they don't know what they want to do, then I think they should take the gamble and don't take the $25 early registration. If they want to hold off until the end, that's totally up to them. But I don't want to discourage other parents who are ready to sign up and who it's kind of a routine for them to do so. I'd rather get that data in the system if they know they want to ride, so that we can plan accordingly and have that kind of be our maximum ridership at this point. You know, I don't see it being advantageous not to start to collect the information, or we're never going to be in a situation where we have bus runs ready for the fall if we do go back to school.
Okay, I have one more comment, and that comment is this. Okay, so we just talked about the fact that we're gonna have to discuss the possibility that we're only going to offer busing to students who are under the statute, K through 6, you know, the statutory requirement. What if people start signing up, paying the fee, and they don't fall within the statutory requirement? They're grades 7 through 12, or they register their whole family at the reduced cost, whatever it is. What's our plan then?
Yeah, I mean, I threw that out there as something I think we should talk about at a future meeting and have some dialogue about. I don't want people watching tonight to think that that's like a done deal or anything. But if my perspective would be, if they signed up for the bus, let's say they were a 9th grade student, and for whatever reason, the committee ends up having that dialogue and we decide that we're not going to transport high school students and they've already registered and paid, well, then we would reimburse them for what they paid. That I think, I mean, that would be on us if we changed our policy after we accepted something.
So I think we better make this very clear on here, that, you know, if we're going to change the policy on who can actually ride the bus, that's refundable. Because if I go and I register just like I did last year, and you know what, I'm going to get a seat on the bus. That's what I anticipate, unless it's very clear to me in my little handout and in the stuff that's put out by our school district, that might not be what happens, even though I've signed up for it. Then I think it's very important to make that clear. We may change this policy. We just talked about that's a big possibility. The other question I have, and I have one more. Let's say that I'm sorry. Let's say that I have to think about this because, you know, this impacts people quite a bit. Let's say that we're down by 2 months next year. People don't ride the bus for 2 months. We don't pay the bus company, just like we didn't do it this year. What happens to the fee? These are the questions I have. I'm gonna go offline now.
I can't believe I'm going to say this. I kind of forgot your first question at this point. Maybe I'll start at the second one and work my way back again.
Here I go. You want to go to the first question? The first question was.
Let me do the second one, then I'll go back. You know, like this particular year, even these fees that we, you know, assess for the ridership, they really don't represent what the true cost is for transporting students who are out of zone or who, you know, don't live within the requirement. If we actually assess families for the true dollar amount and cost, I'm going to guess it's probably close to the $700 or $800 per student is what they would have to be paying for the transportation. So this, you know, 200 or 175 is almost kind of like a token toward their transportation, so that it helps us with routing. Again, we've tried to not pass off a lot of costs to parents if we can. We've cut fees where we can on parking and, you know, for clubs at the high school and middle school. So we're trying to make the district as attractive as possible to parents, and understanding that there's a lot of extra costs on parents to have kids in schools. So it's, when we went out in March and we were out for the rest of the spring, we didn't reimburse anyone for fees that they had paid. Again, you could make the argument that, you know, should we have done that? Should it be prorated to the day? I would say, yeah, it's a strong argument to make, but if we're going to do that, then you really should be paying the full amount of what it costs to begin with, and then we could be prorating that amount. But I don't think people want to get into, you know, what does it truly cost me to ride the bus? That would be the actual fee to pay. So I don't know, you know, again, if someone paid for the year and we're out of school for staggered weeks or things like this, I wouldn't necessarily say reimburse them, but, you know, if they were out for the whole year, obviously, yes, we wouldn't take their money or if the school committee changed a policy after they registered and paid, I think you owe them to reimburse them for that. I wouldn't feel right holding on to their money for that. But if there's just some interrupted service over the course of the year, I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of refunding that. That's really a committee decision, but I'd have to provide you with a better analysis to show you what the true cost is. And you'd have to take that into consideration at the same time when you were setting your fees. But I don't get the sense that anyone wants to increase the fee from $200 to, $700 or $800 per kid.
Any other thoughts or comments on this particular? I just want to, mention it, and I know this is tough to ask people to register and pay for buses, and we don't know we're going to have them or not, but you have to agree that it is important to get the data if we are going to have buses. And I just wanted to comment that I've been on the committee for 3 years, and this is the year I heard the least complaints about bus routes, and people wanted to make changes, and maybe they just people don't contact me because I don't know. But I thought it was very smooth at the beginning of the year. I didn't hear as many complaints, so I think they did a really nice job at planning out the bus routes and making adjustments as they needed to. I mean, obviously you can't make everybody happy, but I think of the 3 years I've been on the committee, far and away, this was the least amount of issues that I can remember. But I think it is important that we have that information so that if we do go back, that we can do the same thing next year. So. All right, if there are no more comments, questions, we'll take a motion to approve the new fees and calendar structure.
I make a motion to approve the 2021. What's that?
I'm sorry, I can't vote for this handout as it is, only because it doesn't say on there that if the policy changes, then we're gonna refund. Because you could get everybody signing up and paying the fee, and then we change our whole entire system in the next few weeks, and then people are gonna have to get their money back. So that's not clear on here at all.
Okay, well, we'll take the motion in a second and then for further discussion, and then we can vote as we deem fit.
Okay.
All right, so John, if you want to do the motion.
Yep, I make a motion to approve the 2021 school year transportation fee schedule and what was the term? Calendar.
Collection dates, I guess.
Collection calendar. As
Do you have
presented.
a second?
Second.
Second, so we have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Well, my further discussion is, okay, that's fine on the fees and the schedule and so on. But if this is the handout, which is essentially our policy, then we should make it clear on here that if anything changes in this policy before school starts, given that we're dealing with COVID and all of this, then, people may not be able to get this right on the bus.
Okay. Any other comments or questions before we vote? Okay, we'll take a vote. Donna,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Maria?
I'm still not clear. Are we voting for it exactly as it exists?
Yes.
Okay, so it's no.
Okay, and I will say vote yes, so 4-1 to approve the fee schedule and calendar. All right, kindergarten enrollment.
Thank you. Just an update. I really want to thank the staff at central office and the clerks from the schools that came in last week to help us with the second kindergarten enrollment. Joanna at the office, Jane McDonald did a wonderful job, I thought, kind of coming up with a registration drive-in style. So I think overall they received about another 40 families for kindergarten students. Families came into the parking lot, completed paperwork, and were able to go. And that data actually helps us to inform some decision-making for the fall. So I provided you in the attachment of the memo the total number of enrollments to date on kindergarten. We only had a couple, 2 overall, new first graders enroll at various schools, but it's good to get that data as quick as possible. But we do have the kind of the K numbers that we typically would make a recommendation on enrollment wise for the fall or the number of classes we're going to offer. So we've got a couple of borderline classes on this list as far as total numbers, with an anticipation that under most years you'd actually receive some additional enrollments over the course of the summer. But I honestly, again, just don't know where we're at. So I wanted to provide you with the numbers, tell you that the registration was very successful. But at the end of this week as well, I am going to reach out to these 336 families and ask them to let me know personally if, given the COVID kind of pandemic and whatnot, if any of them are rethinking whether they're going to send their child to school in the fall for kindergarten, because it's not a requirement. I'd like to just know if they're considering withdrawing and then actually just having them come the following year, or if they're going to be considering like a private type scenario for the fall with smaller numbers or a home daycare type situation, as opposed to a public school, given the uncertainty with regard to the fall. So I'm going to send that notice home with a little survey response that I'm going to ask them to get back pretty quickly to me on, so that either at the next meeting in June or at the latest, the first meeting in July, I can make a recommendation to you with regard to whether we should have 4 or 5 sections at each of the individual schools. I think it's worth seeing if people are still going to plan on coming in the fall, or if we happen to get 5 or 6 or 7 kids who say they're not going to come, then we can staff accordingly. Just to refresh your memory, each of our schools are currently staffed with 4 sections. So we always start with 4 kindergarten classrooms in each building. And then obviously as the number gets to 20, 21, 22, we start looking to see if we need to add a 5th section. In the budget itself right now, we have budgeted 2 extra kindergarten sections that are kind of to be determined where they should go. So we do have funding for 2 additional kindergarten teachers, but we just haven't committed to where they're going yet. But again, I'd rather just see if the numbers shake out over the next week or 2, and then bring back a formal recommendation with regard to what we should do with those 2 extra teaching positions.
How do these numbers compare to like last year's sign up at this point?
Off the top of my head, because I didn't look at them after the second section, I do think we got about 40 or 45 registrants during the second kindergarten phase, so we're not that far off. Last year, right out of the gates, I believe it was the Harrington that kind of had almost in the high 90s. So we knew that was going to trigger a 5th section right away, so we went to that. As we went into the summer, I want to say it was Byam, however, it might have been Center, but one of the numbers started to creep up, and we ended up adding a 5th section of K at that school, probably in early August. So we obviously would like to do it as soon as possible, just to set a teacher and get classrooms set up and whatnot. But I don't think it's going to hurt to take an extra week and actually just get data from these families to make sure that they're committed to coming in the fall, that they haven't changed their mind for anything. And then I'll bring back that final recommendation to you in the next meeting or 2. But overall, I thought the numbers were actually pretty, pretty consistent. No huge red flags for me. And I thought we actually got very good response from the drive-in registration. So that was positive.
Good. Okay. Questions on kindergarten? Maria? Yep, Maria.
Does anybody know what the status of that big project that's going on Route 110 is? It looks like a lot of apartments or a lot of units, and it's coming along pretty quickly. Would that be Center School?
Where is it?
The one on 110?
It's right on 110.
Right, the intersection with Hunt Road?
Yeah, that's a huge project.
Yeah.
Does anybody know what's going on with that?
I honestly haven't been out in that road in a bit.
I go there all the time.
Yeah,
It's
that
coming
would be
along.
districted to Byam.
Okay.
Yeah, when it does open. I don't have any other, on my radar, any other like child-friendly housing developments opening up in that area. There was some talk of like some single, maybe 2-family apartments. But I think some of them may have even been targeted for like 55 and older. type communities. I'll find out for you. I'll take a ride out there and see which development that one is in particular. But I don't have anything on my radar as far as affecting the BIAM enrollment over the next couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think it's that close to being completed yet at this point. At least the last time I went by it, I don't know how close it was to being completed, but
Is it near the Enterprise Bank?
Yeah, it's
no.
not too far. It's at Hunt. It's before.
Yeah, actually, no, it's not that far. It's not that far, yeah.
All right.
It's
I'll
not that
take a
far.
ride
It's
out there by
back
the
way
end of the week.
It's the back way to Byam, Jay. It's not that far from Enterprise Bank. I can give you a lift over there tomorrow if you want to take a
It's
look.
coming along pretty quickly. I go by it almost every day. But just wonder.
I'll take it. We'll take a trip out there. I honestly haven't. I haven't seen that one. Is it on the way to Kimball's? We can get an ice cream.
Well, I mean, technically, yes, because it's
It'll
on
take a
110.
while and you'll have to go into Westford.
We could take you there. I'll drive you around, Jay. It'd be unbelievable.
No, we'll check that one out. I honestly don't. I don't know.
All right, anything else on kindergarten numbers? Okay, next thing is superintendent's recommended 2021 revised budget.
Great. So next item on the agenda this evening, again, is just to talk a little bit about the reduction that we're looking at for fiscal 21. And instead of producing the whole new budget book for you with the recommendation included, what I ended up doing was just putting this in memo form. And then after we review it, if you agree with the recommendations, I would incorporate this into the budget document. And then we would share that budget document with town meeting for the June 22nd town meeting. But just to refresh your memory, when we started preparing in the fall and early winter for the fiscal 21 budget, which is going to begin July 1st, we were planning for a $2 million increase in our local operating budget. So we were going from $61 million to $63 million. And that was the recommendation that I had given you at the end of January that you then received and deliberated on in February. And we ultimately approved it and sent it on to the Finance Committee. And we ended up canceling the Finance Committee meeting, which I think was like the week right after we closed early on March 13th. So we didn't actually go to Finance Committee until just last week. But since then, obviously, things have changed a little bit in consultation and work with the town manager. He would like to assume a 20% reduction in local revenues. Well, not local revenues, in local receipts from state aid. So that would include Chapter 70 and any kind of unrestricted local aid that comes from the government to support the town side, as well as adjustments to the different town department revenues, excise tax, things along those lines, if we're anticipating some reductions. So originally we were looking at about a 3.2% increase, or that $2 million. And we've been asked to basically cut about $1.3 million, $1.4 million out of the budget. So we'd only be going up $667,000 or 1.9%. So obviously that's a little bit less. It's a reduction of 1.3 million or 2.19%. On page 2 of the memo is, how we would recommend going about solving this problem for fiscal 21 and doing it in as least of an impactful way as possible, because I really do feel the operating budget we put together to begin on July 1 is a very strong budget. I think it shows a commitment to our continued funding of staff and services that are meeting our previous strategic plan and obviously the work that we plan moving ahead. So I think they were all, wise recommendations and deliberated well by the committee. And a couple of ways for us to basically achieve that 1.33 million is outlined below. So the first one is actually a very easy one. As you recall, in the last meeting, we had been able to provide for the elementary literacy purchase and do so using all fiscal 20 surplus funds. So we originally were planning on about a $750,000 million purchase for the program. And we're going to try to spend about $500,000 in fiscal 20 with surplus. And then in the fiscal 21 budget, we had budgeted an extra $250 in the curriculum adoption line. So the total purchase ended up coming in, I want to say, at about $650,000. It was a little less than we anticipated, which I think was great. And we were able to fund all of that through fiscal 20 money. So we don't need the 250,000 that was budgeted in fiscal 21. So that 250 can actually just come off and be reduced from the fiscal 21 budget. And that really has no impact on any programs or services we had planned for next year. The second line item is we basically pay for what we call employee separation costs. So this would be like sick leave buyback payments to staff members who have been here and give proper notice of their retirement by a certain date. They're eligible for certain buybacks at retirement. Because we never know when we're planning, say, the fiscal 20 budget, exactly who is going to give their intent to retire and who is going to retire, we typically budget that cost when it's known in the wintertime in the following year's budget. So we knew this past winter that X number of teachers told us that they were going to retire at the end of the school year. Joanna has calculated that to the penny of what the payment is going to be. We include that dollar amount in fiscal 21. And then normally what would happen is teachers would get their last paycheck in June, which would cover this past school year, and they're all whole. And then the first pay period in July, they would receive a check for that amount of money because we basically budgeted that in 21. There's no reason why we can't pay that in 20 as part of their last check, because technically they've earned that money and they've separated. We usually just do that for an accounting purpose because we don't know exactly what to include in the budget. So as we talked about earlier, we have certain surpluses within the fiscal 20 budget, and we have sufficient funds to be able to pay that $120,928.25 now. So what we're saying to do is actually just pay that, get that money off the books in fiscal 20. Then we can reduce the fiscal 21 budget by that dollar amount, and that'll help us achieve that $1.33 million reduction we need to make. That also for us really does not create a structural deficit as far as our planning is concerned, because we normally would get into fiscal 21, figure out who was retiring in fiscal 21, and we would budget that amount in fiscal 22. So worst case scenario, we just go back to our regular budgeting cycle and we quantify whoever's leaving at the end of 21, put that in the 22 budget and pay it out in that first pay period in 22. This is a strategy that we may look to in the future if we have surplus funds within a budget year to basically pay that money, get it off the books and not carry that liability to the next fiscal year. But this will not create a structural deficit in fiscal 21 for us to be dealing with in fiscal 22. So I think that's another clean recommendation. And then the last one is basically the balancing number, 962,071.75. This would be the minimum amount that we would need to take to basically add up to the 1.333 million reduction to make our budget balance for next year. And the recommendation would be to utilize a portion of the 1.1 million that we have not expended in regular ed and special education transportation, which we talked about previously tonight. Basically transfer those funds to from the local budget transportation account to the local budget out of district tuition account. Those are accounts that the school committee is authorized to basically utilize to prepay tuition for the first 3 months of the following fiscal year. So we could basically spend the 071,075 now using available fiscal 20 money, reduce our fiscal 21 out of district tuition account by that number, and basically balance the budget. Now, obviously, this does create a deficit in 21 that we have to be mindful of in 22, but we have to look at it within the context of circuit breaker, which we still fully don't know what is going to happen with circuit breaker for next year, as well as any offset we may get from the Valley Collaborative partnership. You know, we know overall Valley's returning at least $500,000 to its member communities this year. It may actually go up as high as $1 million with excess revenue. So that's additional money that's going to come back to us that has not been budgeted, and that would come back to us as a special ed tuition offset. So we potentially are going to get some relief in 21 from those accounts anyway. And then when we get into 21, we would actually see where we're at out of district wide. But we have actually done a very good job over the last 3 to 3.5 years of building up our special education circuit breaker fund to just about $3 million at the end of June 30th, at the end of this fiscal year, which is going to be the maximum amount that we can actually carry over from year to year. So we have some play within that circuit breaker number, which we typically have used to help offset out-of-district special education tuition costs. And I'm comfortable doing so and trying to manage that that shortfall in fiscal 21. So that would basically be, 3 entries that would add up to the $1.3 million. That would not negatively impact any of the staff, programs, or services that we had planned for fiscal 21. We would be able to finish our hiring process for fiscal 21 and actually be in a very competitive and very good place with regard to other districts, because other districts are still trying to figure out if there's going to be a cut or not. I think, Town Manager Cohen's recommendation to do the 20% cut hopefully will be the worst case scenario. And if anything, potentially there'd be relief from that number if Chapter 70 ever wasn't cut as much. If we ended up getting any additional aid from the state, either through the CARES Act, through any additional SE money that could be used to offset any revenue shortfalls, I think we'd be going into fiscal 21 in as about a good a shape as we possibly could. And I'm confident that we could manage any kind of shortfall at that point. So these would be my 3 recommendations to you. We've obviously discussed this as an admin team, and we vetted these various scenarios for you. We have tried to figure out the least way to minimally impact, again, program services for the students going into a somewhat, again, unknown year as far as in-person remote learning goes. I think this provides us optimal flexibility within fiscal 21 to accomplish everything that we've set out to do. I think these transactions are also very transparent. It's not that we're moving money all around the budget to try to make up for this 1.3 million. I think these are very explainable. I think we could, easily tell the finance committee and town meeting why we're making these adjustments. And I would have no problem standing behind them. So these would be my recommendations, and I'm happy to discuss them further with you tonight or answer any questions you may have.
All right. Anybody have any questions on this?
No questions. I have a comment.
Hi, John.
So just real quick, I wanted to say it's unfortunate that we're not going to get the full budget this year. Obviously, that's never a positive. But I mean, overall, it kind of speaks to the situation we are in fiscally as a district and how important it was to be conservative all this time. So, everybody has to sacrifice right now, and this feels like our part. So thank you for being conservative, and I'm glad that we're not losing any staff and minimal, or if any, student services. So that's all.
Other questions or comments on Maria?
I don't understand one thing about, so just maybe explain it. This prepayment of services that we're doing, these are services that will be for sure certain coming next year, no matter what. If we're getting the delivery of them by distance learning, if we're getting the delivery of them, whatever, they're coming.
Right. So the easiest way to think about this would be, we have certain students in our district who maybe, let's say, are in a residential placement. So they're an out-of-district student. A lot of them, even during this period of school closure, the residential placements have actually stayed open. The residential homes that the students are in are still open, so the students are still receiving their education. So we know, let's say Jay was in a particular placement, we know ahead of time what the rate is for that particular school and that placement for the fall. And we're able to, again, by statute, prepay for his, let's say it was me, prepay for my tuition for July, August, and September. Using fiscal 20 money, the school committee needs to vote to do that. But that's within your authority to do. You don't have the ability to say prepay for transportation. So even though we know we're going to incur transportation costs next year in some fashion, by statute, you don't have the ability to prepay a transportation bill, but you do have the ability to prepay a special education tuition. So that's why I'm recommending you move the money from transportation to special ed tuition, which you have the ability to do within your control. And then you authorize the prepayment of the tuition that we know we're going to pay to these special education schools in fiscal 21, that we just take a small piece of this. And Joanna could quantify for you exactly what the total dollar amount in the tuitions we're going to pay next year is. But this is just a piece of that. And it basically.
Okay. I understood all that. My question is, if these boarding schools, live-in schools, so on, we know for sure are going to be places that we have to pay next year because the services will be provided.
Yes, and we've
Okay.
been paying them all spring as well for students that are currently there now.
Okay. So it's not going to become like a nursing home where, you know, we had all these issues and so on. So as long as you're telling me as a school district that we have to pay this money, no matter what. So it's not like transportation where services aren't rendered and so our contract says we're not going to pay it. In this case, you're telling me that these services will be required and so we should prepay them.
Yes, that's my recommendation.
All right, other comments or questions on this, Donna?
Yeah, I like these recommendations. I am concerned about the budget that we had put in place back before all of this happened. And I just want to make sure that our proposed budget is going to be sustainable for the next couple of years. So I know that we'll be all set through next year, but what I don't want to have happen in for the 2022 fiscal year is to be taking a look at a lot of cuts because the money isn't available to us, through the town or through the state. So I guess I would just say that I agree with the recommendations that you're making. I do get worried about making sure that we're, maintaining a sustainable budget for the next couple of years. Or staffing or programming or whatever it is that, we're looking at.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, Donna. I mean, the worst thing the school districts and really any municipal department or town can go through are like peaks in funding that ebb and flow, because you just can't get any continuity with programming or services. And it's very unsettling to the staff as well if people think that, they could get pink slipped or whatnot. As much as it, is a reality in some districts, I really have tried to minimize that. And I don't think in the last number of years that has been anything we've really had to face. I think that this is sustainable. Again, we don't know what is going to happen with the fiscal 21. No one does, even at the state level. I'm hoping that the 20% reduction in local aid is sufficient. I actually hope it doesn't even come close to that. But I think that's a worst case scenario. I think we do need to get into fiscal 21 to start figuring out what is going to happen statewide with fiscal 22 and any kind of revenues that could be coming in from the state. I don't know at that point in time what's going to happen with the Student Opportunity Act or any kind of extra funding for Chapter 70 in a funny kind of way. It's almost beneficial. I know it's never been beneficial that we haven't received a lot of state aid, but it's almost, in these kind of predicaments, it's almost funny how it's working in our favor because, let's say a 20% cut in state aid to us, personally, might be $2 million, where 20% state aid cut to a more urban district, a Methuen, a Lawrence, or Lowell, I mean, you're talking, $20 to $30 million. I mean, that just wouldn't even be sustainable for us to consider something like that. So I think we're actually, in a decent place as far as that's concerned, in a very strange way. I'm acknowledging that it's strange. But I actually do think we're going to need to be very obviously mindful about decisions that we make. I think it's going to be important for us to stay on top of any of the different recommendations that come from state, federal, any of the additional kind of CARES Act money, state stimulus money, use it to our advantage. look for program and operating efficiencies whenever we can. Whenever we get into, fiscal 21, we start to plan for fiscal 22. I think that budget's actually going to start earlier. I usually don't get into full budget swing until Thanksgiving, Christmas time. I see us probably, October, Halloween, Thanksgiving time, starting that process. And then we're probably going to start to have discussions earlier than usual on budget and putting together a budget plan for 22. But I think, again, the only factor in this number that's even, potentially creating a little bit of a structural deficit is that 900,000 in special ed tuition. But I think we have sufficient funds built up in circuit breaker to basically be able to level that out between circuit breaker, Valley reimbursement coming in, that I really do think we'll be able to manage it.
Okay. Anybody else?
I just wanted to follow up. Everybody else had a question.
Go ahead, Don.
So Jay, you're right about the peaks and valleys, and I think that that's something that our school district prior to you coming here had experienced. I think by the time you arrived, we were rebuilding, from the 2008, financial crisis. And it's really frustrating because I feel like we finally have gotten back to the place that we had always wanted to be. And, I would hate to see us have to dismantle things again, as you said, and kind of do that roller coaster ride of, in a school system, because you're right, the continuity is very, very important to the staff and to the kids. So, I certainly hope that we can maintain that. And I guess I would say, whatever we have to do to make sure that that can happen, would certainly be my goal. And I forgot what the other thing was. So it's just about, this. So.
Yeah, it is tough. I mean, I recall back to the, when I was in Lowell at the time, but like 2002, 2003 was a really challenging budget time for us. 2008, 2009 was very difficult. That's when you saw a lot of the ARA stimulus money. You saw widespread in all communities, cuts and reductions. And then, there's a little blip around 2012, 2013 that we had to kind of navigate through. And then I obviously came here in 2015. This has been the first, kind of financial hiccup we've had to deal with. But I think we're actually because we've spent the last couple of years, building up our reserves, we're on very solid footing, even going into a down cycle in budgeting, that I do think we're going to be able to pull through this. I just think we all need to be on the same page when it comes to, our budgeting, our recommendations, our staffing levels, our communications with the public about what we, what we're driving forward with initiative-wise and project-wise. Obviously, we're going to have to approach this cautiously, but I really think we're on footing.
Sorry, Jay. That was my other point is that, you're right. First of all, I completely understand what you're saying about being self-reliant. But, we also have taxpayers who are going to be looking, for some relief as well. And so, we may be in a position as a school district where we may not get the support from town meeting or from the town manager in terms of budget recommendations that will allow us. And I just want to be careful because, I think education is very important. I think people recognize that. But I also know that when we're facing these, financial difficulties, people across the town, want to make sure that, that they can keep food on the table and a roof over their head. So right. I'm sorry. That was my thought about it.
All right. Anything else? So I like to also echo what everyone has said in terms of I appreciate the work went into this and the fact that you were able to do this without changing the programming and the staffing and everything else that we planned going forward. A lot went into the reports for the Student Opportunity Act. I know a lot's going into the strategic plan that involves having a good, strong budget. So the fact that we could do that without affecting all that is great. Procedural type of question. Because we are changing the budget we approved, do we have to approve the changes that we're recommending here? And then do we have to approve a new bottom line? before we vote to transfer anything?
I guess the way that I would look at doing this is technically I laid out the recommendations in that report. In the next report on the agenda are the actual transfers themselves. I thought if you made motions and seconded and then discussed the transfers, if you voted to approve those transfers, then Joanna and I would go back and actually incorporate them into the new budget document, because you'll technically be voting, I think it's page 13, you know, that list of the DESI accounts, the major function code accounts. You're going to vote to reapprove that list to basically start July 1. But we could also, if you wanted to this evening, because the town meeting is really just concerned with the bottom line figure.
Right.
Once you approve these transfers, you could vote to approve a new bottom line operating budget figure of the $61,667,000 dollars, and then that is actually what the budget book is going to tie out to.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure we're doing it because we did approve the budget. So.
You did. Yep.
Okay.
And we have to go
Right,
back
so-
and right on Thursday, Jay?
Correct. So Thursday night, what I would do is basically, I would email them ahead of time just so that they had this document. But we would go in Thursday night and just basically review these adjustments with them.
Okay.
And they're just looking to approve the 667, sorry.
All right. So if I have this right, we're going to have to vote to approve a transfer for employee separation costs. That's one motion. Another motion to approve the transfer from transportation to special ed. Then another motion to approve prepayment, and then another motion to approve the bottom line. Okay.
Yes, and then the only other thing that you don't have before you as a budget transfer in 20 this evening is the 250,000 that's in the 21 budget for the curriculum adoption. That I am just going to reduce from that page. And then when I bring you back the new budget book, that number won't be there.
Okay.
So I guess if you technically wanted to vote to approve cutting that number, you could, but that's in the 21 budget. It's not in the 20. I just didn't want to confuse things.
Okay. All right. So I guess we just approve the bottom line. We should be covering it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, technically, the finance committee and even the town meeting is just approving the bottom line figure. So if in the end, if you take that vote, I'm comfortable just making these adjustments. I'll bring you back a revised budget at your meeting on the 16th, which is still prior to town meeting on the 22nd. And then we can turn around copies very quickly for the town meeting reps. I can email them out a link to the new one, and we'll have some paper copies available at the town meeting.
Okay. All right. So you want to move on to the transfers?
Sure. Yep, that's the next report before you this evening. I would take them one at a time. The first one would be to move funding from transportation to employee separation costs in the amount of $120,928.25.
All right. I'll take a motion on that.
I make a motion for the school committee to approve the FY 2020 local operating budget transfer of $128,928.25 from the transportation category to the employee separation cost category as presented.
Second?
All right. Was that motion correct? $120,928.25, correct?
And 25 cents, yep.
Okay, great.
Correct.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion on this particular transfer? Okay, we'll take a vote. Donna,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Maria,
Aye.
and I. Okay, so 5-0 to transfer to employee separation costs. Okay, next one.
I make a motion that the school committee authorize the prepayment of FY 2021 tuitions in accordance with MGL Chapter 71, Section 71D, and MGL Chapter 40, Section 4E.
Second.
Just to clarify, we're voting now to authorize the prepayment. This isn't a transfer yet, this is just the authorization, correct?
Mhm.
Correct.
Okay, any questions on this? we had the legal reference and all that in the packet, so. Okay, so if there are no questions, Maria,
Yes.
Jeff,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Donna,
Aye.
aye, so 5-0.
And the next one is the transfer on the sped tuitions. But did you, again, the minimum number we're gonna need to transfer to make this work is that 962,071.75. But what we're recommending is you actually authorize a transfer of the 1.1 million to give us a little bit of cushion between now and the end of June. In the event that, we're going through the closing for the fiscal year, we know the 962 is going to have to go out the door. But if we're liquidating purchase orders or service orders that end up not getting paid and accounts have funds in them, what we'd like to be able to do is have a little bit of flexibility to be able to pay. And this is one area where you can do this, the additional tuitions, so that we don't leave money basically on the table on June 30th, that we're setting ourselves up properly for 21. Now, anything that we expend beyond the 963 that we previously talked about, we will certainly come back and tell you at the next meeting what the recommendation was. But we would just like you to basically kind of endorse this plan or recommendation, so that as we find little pockets of money that aren't paid, again, the purchase order was issued, it was a product that we ended up not getting in because of, shipping related issues or whatever. If we can use that money and basically offset and help 21, we'd like to be able to do that. So it's I think Joanna had built in approximately $140,000. I don't know if that's going to be there or not, but at least it provides that cushion. You're kind of acknowledging what we're doing with the end of the year closing of the books. And then we certainly would come back and report to you whatever we ended up taking as final transfers. Final payments, I'm sorry.
Okay, so take a motion.
All right. So I make a motion for the school committee to approve the FY 2020 local operating budget transfer of up to $1.1 million from the transportation category to the prepaid tuitions category as presented.
Second.
Okay, any questions or discussion on this particular one? Everybody's good? Okay, we'll take a vote. Donna,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Maria,
Aye.
and myself, aye, so 5-0. And then, can we just get a motion, John, to approve the bottom line budget?
So that's the 61,667, 61,670,000, that one.
Correct.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the new bottom line budget number for the FY 2021 school year. The amount is $61,667,000. That's it.
Second.
Second. Okay, any questions or comments on this?
That wasn't my best work. Go ahead.
Good job. All right, Jeff,
Aye.
Maria,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Donna,
Aye.
aye. Great. So hopefully that tied up all the loose ends that we needed to tie up there.
I think it does. And I'll, like I said, we'll work to incorporate this into a final document. We'll explain this to FinCom on Thursday night. And then in your packet for the meeting on the June 16th, we'll include the revised budget with all of these numbers incorporated so that you can see and then vote that's the function code, the major codes accounts that night.
Okay.
Just in closing, if I can on this, I just want to acknowledge a lot of work that, Joanna and her office have done to pull together all of these recommendations. Amy Reese and her team from SPED have actually spent a lot of time kind of combing through the invoices and trying to figure out, what we can prepay, what we can't prepay to help come up with this whole funding solution for next year. So a lot of work has gone into it. I appreciate your support of it. Obviously, I think it's a sound recommendation and action on your part. But really, this wasn't just myself. It was a collective effort, and I want to recognize those others.
One other thing before, since we're already talking finances, I want to thank Donna for pointing it out and Jay for following up on it, that one of the capital items that was originally removed from the list was the Parker Kitchen code compliance, and I believe, Jay, that's been put back on again.
Yeah, it did. When we were in the tri-board meeting and we were reviewing the list of capital items that we're going to go forward for funding next year, I hadn't realized at the time that the code compliance issue on the kitchen at Parker had been struck. I thought it was a different line that had been struck, so Donna actually pointed that out. But when I followed up with Paul after the meeting, obviously he was very understanding and good about that. We want to address code issues. We were trying to push off just the major renovation to the next year. So in the packet that he presented to FinCom the other evening and then the Board of Selectmen, it does include money for the code compliance issues for next year. So that was good. So that will go forward to town meeting on June 22nd.
Great. All right. Last item, Valley Collaborative appointment.
Yes, so the school district is a member of Valley Collaborative, and typically every year the school committee needs to vote to appoint the member to the board of directors at Valley. I have actually been your appointee. It can either be the superintendent or a school committee member. I have been the appointee for the last 4 or 5 years and really enjoy the work of the collaborative. So it's something that I would obviously like to remain doing. But the school committee needs to vote to make the appointment each year. And so this is an annual vote you take. You've taken it every June ever since. I'm happy to continue to serve in that role. I enjoy working with the other superintendents and Chris Scott and her staff at Valley. So I'm happy to continue serving in that capacity.
All right, I'll take a nomination to approve Jay as the Valley Collaborative board member.
So it's just a regular motion, right?
Yep.
Okay. I make a motion to appoint Dr. Jay Lang as the FY21 board member for the Valley Collaborative.
Second.
Okay, any comments or questions on this? I would just like to thank you for doing this. Valley Collaborative, I have a lot of connections to. My own family members, and I think they do a great job over there. I think they're, they're very, like we are here, very fiscally conservative. They're wise with their money and they're good with their programming. And I think a lot of that goes to the good board of directors they have going, and the leadership they have from Dr. Scott there. So I thank you for serving, and hopefully they continue to have a strong program as they have in the past. All right, so we'll take a vote. Donna.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Maria.
Aye.
And aye. Okay, so 5-0 on that one. Okay, I believe that's all the new business for tonight. So any liaison reports? No, the school year is winding down, so I don't know if anybody has anything. Okay, hearing none. Any new items that people would like to bring up at this point? Donna, you have something?
Yep, I received an email, so it's just easier for me to read it. Emma Walsh, Chelmsford High School Junior, is holding a vigil to honor George Floyd and the other Black lives that have been lost, and to support the Black Lives Matter movement this Friday evening from 6 to 7 p.m. on the town common. Community Services Coordinator Jen Melanson and Deputy Police Chief Dan Ahern have assisted in the planning logistics in response to this request. Ms. Walsh will be requesting that everyone in attendance at the vigil wear a face mask and remain socially distant.
Okay, anybody else have anything for new items? I just want to bring up that today was the election, so I'm going to go out on a limb and congratulate Jeff on his election to his first term on the board, and also thank you for stepping up this past year to fill in for Al Thomas's very sizable shoes, and did a great job with that. Haven't heard back from the town clerk in terms of swearing in. So again, I don't know in terms of reorg how we're going to do this. Probably best bet is to hold off till our next regular meeting, and then maybe we could do something at the beginning of the meeting. Hopefully by then. Been sworn in
Thank you.
and continuing doing that. So just wanted to congratulate Jeff and welcome aboard full-time.
And congratulations to
You,
you, Dennis,
Oh, thank you. Thank
on
you.
your election. And thank you all. This has been you've been very
Congratulations.
understanding, very enjoyable. Thank you.
All
I
right.
just
Any
want to
other,
say, Jeff, I just want to make a comment. Jeff, you've been a great addition. I really enjoyed having you here. So it'll be good to have you for another year at least.
Well, thank you.
yeah. Why only a year? Hopefully 3.
Thank you all I really enjoyed it. It's been it's one of the few things Al has had me do that I've enjoyed so thoroughly. So thank you.
That's good. All right. Any other new items? Okay. Any other public comment that people want to bring up? Anything we missed at the beginning? We got an email from Hannah Barker just asking us to be conscious of the fact that we are probably going to have to go into online learning in some form or the other in the fall, whether it's an adjunct to what we're doing in the classroom or whatever. So just keep that in mind. And I know we're doing that. So, but just wanted to mention that she did email us to provide us with that. Anybody else? Okay. All right. I believe that's the last thing. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
second,
Second. All right. Maria,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Donna,
aye.
5-0. Motion to adjourn is approved. Everybody have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take
Have a
care
good
all.
night.
Good night.
Night.